Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer
Oh, and it just sounded like Matthew
Matt,
cut up.
and welcome back to day 211. I have some big news to cover tonight.
And of course, we have the past 24 hours of news to cover, and real quick, since I just noticed a massive audio lag in Matthew, and he's probably noticing one in my call, I want to let y'all know that our internet connection tonight is absolutely shot. We do not have an idea why, we have no clue, we've tried to fix it before stream, but it doesn't look like there's been a fix yet, and looking at our OBS screen, the kilobytes are only about half of what they should be. So if there are any problems, just let us know. Well, don't let us know. We'll probably know anyways. And if the stream happens to go down for one reason or another, just know that there will be an immediate replacement for that stream right afterwards, probably within the next few minutes. And so with that in mind, we have to get to some very pressing news today from Russia. As we were talking about last night and we're not able to cover on stream, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, was supposed to come out and make a speech to the Russian public last night addressing changes that the Russians would be making. It was feared at that time last night, and that is also the title of last night's stream, that mobilization would begin in Russia due to some very draconian laws that were passed by Russia's version of the parliament called the Duma. It turns out that Putin did make an address last night, and he declared that 300,000 reservists would be mobilized to fight the war in Ukraine. There would be referendums that would be put in place within the controlled areas of the country, where, of course, we know they will vote to enter the Russian Federation because it will be a sham vote, and then these areas will become a part of Russia. And right after Putin said that, he then stated that if there are any attacks or threats to the sovereignty and the security of Russia, Russia would use all weapons available at their disposal to deal with the threat. Of course, this little article right here does not have a link to it because I could not find a version of President Putin's speech that I could sit there and nitpick and make fun of from a normal news source that wouldn't be copyrighted, because one way or another there was a watermark on one, someone else was translating the other in their own words, and so there was no way for me to actually show it on stream. But this is still incredibly concerning news, especially the 300,000 soldiers being mobilized. Now, will these actually make a large impact on the war in Ukraine? Most likely not, because the Russians, of course, are lacking the supplies and equipment to properly supply them and then even get them to the front lines with any kind of weapons in the first place. So the actual impact of this is going to be small, but the other major concern about this entire mobilization is that it's showing that Russia will not accept defeat, at least right now. Even with them losing a massive swath of land in the northeastern Kharkiv area, the Russians are still as dedicated and as determined as before to try and keep this war going regardless of how bad it's going in their favor. This means that there's more soldiers pretty much going into the meat grinder, and there's going to be more white Ladas driving around within the Russian Federation. However, that's if the Russian public doesn't have anything to say about it, and it seems, from what we've seen on video, the Russian public has immediately started to protest and demonstrate against the Russian government and their actions in this draft. And so here we can see some mass protests that occurred in Moscow over the past 24 hours. So here's the video. We see the police grabbing people out of the crowd and dragging them away. And one thing that's interesting to me, hopefully Matthew can hear me, is that the protesters in Russia never attack the police. The police can pretty much walk right through them, grab whoever they want, and then leave with them, which is kind of odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it is pretty odd, actually.
And I gotta wonder, does the Russian public feel so powerless against their government that even when they are standing against them, they don't even do anything, I guess you could say, somewhat violent acts to show how against the government they are? Because we don't really see that. In fact, I haven't seen that at all during this war, and I'm wondering why that's the case. You see the police grabbing another one, and no one does anything to stop them. You now see the cameras move to another area of the street. where you see the police dragging away even more protesters. We see this guy putting up a little bit of a fight, but not really. Also, notice that this guy doesn't even have his vest on properly. He's just like dangling off his body. Now you see them lifting off the guy like he's some kind of a game animal that they call it. And with that, that's the end of the video, and once again, it's showing that civil unrest is starting to begin within Russia, but so far, the protesters are not violent enough to show that the government is in direct jeopardy because of them. Moving on into our next clip, however, we did see another instance, another angle of the Russian police moving in to try and put down these protesters immediately, and so here's that video. We see a massive amount of police vehicles moving into this area of Moscow, letting us know that while these protesters are not necessarily violent and going into straight-up riots, the Russian government is taking the situation seriously and trying to make sure that they keep a handle on things before they get way out of control. We once again see police carting off loads of protesters. You hear the protesters chanting on the other side of the street. And with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Russian public that is still there is still vehemently against this war, and it's good to know that a lot of them have not been brainwashed to the point that they forgot about that promise that there would be no mobilizations whatsoever. If we pull up Russian pledge for no mobilization, I will show you all that the Russian government, if I can find it, oh man. Don't you, I can't stand this about Google, Matthew. You can't ever find an old article anywhere on the internet. If something's just happened, it's all flooded with stuff that just recently happened. You can't find the old stuff from months ago. So sadly, I won't be able to show you all that, but it is out there. On this one, I'm going to have to say, trust me, bro, because at the beginning of the war, Putin clearly stated that there would be no mobilizations under any circumstances. This special military operation would use contract soldiers only. And the mobilization, regardless of however you want to word it, it is drawing up conscripts from the reserves. And also, another thing real quick, the reservists in Russia are not like the reservists in the United States. When you think of reservists in the U.S., you think of the U.S. Army Reserve, or you think of the National Guard. The reservists in Russia are actually what we would call, I forgot the exact name for them, Matthew. Do you know the name of the U.S. soldiers that then become veterans, but for around 5 to 10 years, they could be called back into military service at a moment's notice?
I think they are just considered reservists.
Let me actually pull that up real quick. Definition of reservists in the U.S. A member of a military reserve. Well, I thank you so much, Merriam-Webster, for clarifying that for me. I'm sure that that's exactly what we were looking for. But let's see. What's a reservist in the military? Let's see. Okay, that's kind of the definition I just said about the U.S. Army Reserves and the National Guard, but...
Inactive reserves.
Yeah, inactive reserves. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for clearing that up. Inactive reserves. What we call inactive reserves in the United States is what Russia calls their Army Reserve. And so these guys aren't even in the military. They are being called out of the civilian population, and they're being called back in the service. And in case if y'all do not know, this is being worded by Putin as a partial mobilization of former Russian military soldiers. But the problem with that statement is that all male citizens of Russia have to serve in the military in between the ages of 18 to 29. And so this is a bit of a farce on their part, and is trying to play a word game. Every male citizen in Russia is part of their, I guess you could say, reserve, because they all have served in the military at one point or another. So it's trying to play a word game, but pretty much this is beginning a mobilization of the public. It's just that no one's really looked at it or worded it in that way yet. But with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next clip of news from Moscow, where we can see that a Russian talk show called up a kid, a son of Putin's spokesperson, and told him to report to a recruitment office. And the kid started saying, I'm going to call up someone, I don't have to go because I'm special, pretty much. And so with that, here's this video. Of course, we're using this for news reporting, so it does fall under fair use. But without further ado, here's this video showing the corruption that is pretty much there throughout the entire Russian government.
Аукционе Николай, сын Дмитрия Пескова. Здравствуйте, Николай.
Это кто?
Это военный комиссариат с вами разговаривает. Вы сейчас можете говорить?
Могу.
Добрый день. Да, давайте не будем швырять трубки, как это вы делали в прошлый раз. Значит, Николай, вопрос...
Зачем вы мне звоните? Еще мне говорите, подождите.
Потому что, господин Николай Песков, я могу с вами так разговаривать. Значит, я почему вам звоню? Вам сегодня была отправлена повестка, в том числе и госуслуги, и на бумаге она к вам приходила, и вы пока еще не отозвались. А там был указан номер, по которому вы должны перезвонить, и завтра в 10 утра явиться в военный комиссариат. Во-первых, почему вы не перезвонили? Во-вторых, придете ли вы завтра в военный комиссариат? В 10 утра мы вас ждем.
Вы, 10 утра, естественно, завтра я не приеду.
Так.
Вы должны понимать, если вы знаете, что я господин Песков,
да.
Насколько это не совсем правильно, чтобы я там находился.
Угу.
Короче, я буду это решать я буду это решать на другом уровне, если это не надо.
And look at the face of this guy. He's even like, what the hell? Like, who in the world would have expected that this guy said on TV in Russia, the son of one of Putin's spokespeople, that, obviously I'm not showing up. I'll just call through certain channels, and I'll make sure that I do not have to serve whatsoever.
That's how badly corrupt they are. They aren't even afraid to say it on TV.
Yeah, they aren't even afraid to say it on TV. I'm sure this guy didn't know he was on TV, but look at the face of the guy that's on the show when he hears this come out of this guy's mouth. He's completely blown away. He's like, wait a minute, say that one more time, because there's no way that you can sit there and say that this is excusable. This would be like here in the United States, if a war broke out and the selective service was called upon and there was once again a draft, and then a congressman's son just, there's no medical reason or anything, they just said, they can't serve just because they're a congressman's son. That would be the most jacked up thing that you'd ever seen. And this guy right here probably just realized, wow, our government may not be the best one out there. Because when you look at Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, you'll have seen Vladimir Klitschko, Petro Poroshenko, loads of guys, even Zelenskyy himself putting themselves in the line of danger to help defend their country when it was needed, and you will not see a single spineless Russian politician or their children go and fight in this war to represent their own country. Only the lowest of the low in Russia have to go serve in this war because the politicians aren't having to. And as long as the politicians and I guess you could say the higher-ups in Russia are safe, they're fine with keeping the war going on forever. It doesn't affect them. It just affects what they view as the rabble that makes up their country. And so with that, that's the end of that pretty shocking video, and we're now going to be moving on to our last one. Well, actually, that was our first one. And so we're now going to be moving out of Moscow, and from all of this interesting news and events that's been occurring there today, showing that the Russians may be starting to lose control of the domestic situation a little bit again. And we're now going to be moving up to St. Petersburg, where we can see that protests have started to break out here as well. And as you'll know, St. Petersburg and Moscow are the largest cities within Russia. In fact, the population of Moscow, I know I misspelled that, sorry about that, but we can see that the population of Moscow is close to 12 million. And so nearly 10% of Russia's population lives within this single city. And then we look at St. Petersburg, not Florida. We're looking for there we go. 5 million, just about. So 5 million plus about 12 million, and that's about 17 million. So I would say close to around 16 to 17% of Russia's entire national population lives within these two cities. And so this is a pretty good indicator, especially considering that I guess you could say these are the wealthiest parts of Russia as well, that if things are not going well in St. Petersburg or Moscow, things aren't going well across the rest of the country. And so let's start off with looking at our first clip of the protests that broke out in St. Petersburg today as well. We see them, of course, chanting "No War."
And what are they chanting exactly?
They're chanting "Niet boyne," which means no war. "Niet" means no in Russian, and "boyne" means war. So they're just continuously chanting "no war" over and over and over, which kind of makes their message incredibly clear. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next video showing more mass arrests occurring within St. Petersburg. And according to the information we've got, this truck filled with people that have been arrested is one of many. Something like 1,000 protesters have been arrested over the past 24 hours in Russia.
Так, ну и что? Можно я с вами поменяюсь местами? Как это смотришь?
You see that they packed them in like I don't even know like what they packed them in, sardines?
Очень милые. Очень милые, прелестные ребята здесь. И я с ними тоже еду куда-то, не знаю куда. Нас схватили, повезли.
We see that they're having some conversations with chats inside the police van, and it honestly seems quite cordial back there. You'd think that a lot of people would be solemn if they're going to jail, but these people seem pretty unfazed. But it's good to see that the Russian public is still standing up against the Russian government. Although I think that they could be a little bit more forceful with it, showing that things are getting a little bit tense inside of Russia itself, but it's still good to see that they are standing up against the Russian government. And so we're moving on to our final bit of protest news in St. Petersburg, where we can see one last clip of the protests that occurred today. And of course, the arrests that followed. And so here's the video. You see the police arresting another man on the ground. You see them picking the guy up. We now see them bringing them over to a department store. Now they're picking this guy up and walking him off as well. We see that some chaos has broken out. We got a rumble dome, people. Now, one thing I gotta observe real quick, Matthew, is that the Russian police look better equipped than the Russian army.
Yeah, they seriously do. And is that an old man they're fighting with on the ground?
It looks like it. Let's see again real quick. It looks like they got up, but I can't see where. I think it's that guy. It looks like he's got like Joker face paint on.
I see a lot of people saying it's a woman.
Interesting. Like this one?
No, the one on the ground that's being wrestled.
Oh, over here. Yeah, it looks like it.
Is she unconscious?
I can't really tell. Now they're saying something about Putin, but unfortunately I don't know Russian or any kind of Cyrillic language well enough to actually understand what they're saying. But still, it's great to see that protests are continuing, and hopefully the Russian government will overstep their bounds and mistreat citizens enough that it starts to become a little violent. And I know that's something that sounds a little bit crass to hope for, but that's the only way that you can get the Russian government shaken up. If you look at the end of the Falklands War, the only reason that the military junta in Argentina was overthrown is because the public went into mass, pretty much violent riots, and then the military joined them. So while the civilians, of course, can start a lot of the momentum in having Putin and his regime overthrown, it will require a little bit of support from the military. Because during every single revolt, the military usually always sides against the sitting government, and that's how it succeeds. And so we will be waiting for that to happen whenever it can. And so with that, that's all the news we have from Russia today. But it's starting to paint a little bit more of a bleak picture about what's going on. But I actually forgot. The Russian segment is a lot bigger tonight than I was thinking. It's not just Moscow and St. Petersburg. We did get some news from Yekaterinburg, which is the third largest city in Russia, and we saw here that a lot of people weren't really apt to go to war. Courtesy to Radio Free Europe that provided this video showing what Russians are actually thinking deep within Russia's interior. And so here's the video, and here's their thoughts on going to war.
Нет, я не поддерживаю, в общем, давайте так.
Сами готовы воевать?
Нет. Мне работать надо, семью содержать, а не воевать.
Категорически нет.
Почему?
Мир, потому что должен быть мир. И военное время сейчас вообще ни к чему.
Сами готовы воевать?
Нет. Не готов.
То есть это вредная, ненужная...
Это вредная, ненужная инициатива, конечно. В конце концов, мы живем в 21 веке. И я считаю, что все проблемы можно решать не военным путем. Как-то так.
Нет, не поддерживаю. Абсолютно не поддерживаю.
Какие-то есть аргументы у вас?
Ну, непонятная война почему-то. За что воюем? Зачем напали? Категорично против.
Сами готовы идти?
Нет,
воевать?
нет. Не готов. Лучше сяду, но воевать не пойду. За эту власть точно нет.
Вообще я патриот и очень люблю свою родину. Да, родина позовет, пойду.
Да, то есть если мне придет все-таки повестка, то я поеду.
Поедете? А зачем?
А защищать и отстаивать честь нашей страны. Так.
Пошли бы, если бы тут хотели.
Я думаю, что да.
Почему?
Почему? Президент об этом все сказал, а я его поддерживаю.
А сына отправите своего, ну если есть сын?
У сына есть желание, даже есть у сына. У меня есть сын, у него есть желание, 36 лет ему. Но дело в том, что он не служил, вот, поэтому у него военной подготовки нет.
Я против, конечно.
Чтобы призвали?
Конечно.
Почему?
Ну, потому что у нас 3 детей. Я думаю, что вот эти все политические игры, так сказать, да, не хотелось, чтобы они отразились в нашей семье.
And with that, that's the end of the video. Of course, courtesy to Radio Free Europe that provided it. And it's interesting to see that there is a little bit of a division there, and you can see that some people are clearly against the war and the idea of having to join the military for it, and others are a lot more apt to say they would join and they would fight. But this is a massive difference from the beginning of the war when most people said that they would be glad to go and fight for Russia. But one thing I would like to see with the people who did say, oh yes, I would go, no question, is if you told them, all right, well, I'm with the Ministry of Defense, come with me, we're going to a recruitment office and you're joining the army now, would they be as apt to continue to support the war or support joining the military, or would they do like we've seen in other videos and start running away as fast as they could? And honestly, I would go towards the direction of they probably run away, but sadly we didn't get to see that in that video. And so with that, interesting thoughts and perspectives in Yekaterinburg, and we're now going to be moving down to the area of Krasnodar, where we saw some Fab 500s, which are some of Russia's largest unguided conventional bombs that are dropped by aircraft on the move in the back of a Russian supply truck. We can see the supply truck right here, and the Fab 500s sitting nicely in the back of it. If you floor that truck really hard, Matthew, you just blow the whole thing up because the bomb just slides out the back of the open truck.
Yes.
But with that, that's the end of the video, and a pretty interesting little sight to see. We're now going to be moving on down towards the area of Georgia. And like I said today, there's been massive protests in Russia about the partial mobilization. It appears that some people are still trying to leave the country while they can. Here at the border crossing near Verkhny Lars, right on the Russian-Georgian border, we can see that there has been a massive queue that's formed of Russians trying to enter Georgia and escape the Russian Federation, as we can see right here. Quite a lot of people. Looks like a lot of people who support Russia's war. You see that people are almost getting into collisions with each other to try and get through. Now see this person walking through the traffic. And it seems at this point it would be a lot easier to cross the border by foot than by car, because you'll just sit in the car. With that, that's the end of the video. And pretty interesting to see that there are a large amount of people that are trying to flee Russia, which shows another massive group that isn't really apt on joining into this meat grinder and their parents getting some white lotta. And so with that, we're now going to move, finally, to Grozny. And of course, you remember Don, Matthew.
No, Don. Yes, Don.
Good Don. Well, of course, when Don retired, Don, he decided to go with his best friend to the park, Don. And now they're playing Twister in the park, Don.
Meanwhile, in Kadyrov's world.
Meanwhile, in Kadyrov's world. And of course, I gotta mute that because it's copyright music. But we can see that it's literally Ramzan Kadyrov right here, laying out a sheet of paper on the ground. We can't see what it is, it's blurred out. But it looks like they're about to play a game of Twister in the park with friends. And what better way?
He seems like such a personable fellow.
He seems like such an in touch with reality guy. Look at him around the park benches. I mean, like, this is just genius. He is a very, very relatable person, Don. And so with that, that's the end of that video, and a really weird one considering that he stepped down as the leader of Kadyrov Chechnya just not too long ago, just several weeks ago, and now he's hanging out in a park looking at a giant sheet of paper. It may be Russia's plan to have him assassinated. We're not entirely sure what was on the paper, but still, very weird and somewhat interesting. And so with that, we're finally moving into Ukraine to cover our location unknown news and also our northern Kharkiv news. But before we get to that, we're going to take a quick pause to address our polls and also 3 questions from the chat. And so with that, take it away, Matthew.
All right, folks. So it is now time for our first question segment of the stream. And as the enforcer mentioned earlier, sadly, we are having connectivity issues tonight, which means our viewers are lower than usual, and also my live chat is skipping beats every other minute. So sorry if I missed your live chat question, or if you sent me like a hello message, because I can barely see anything coming through. So hopefully that gets cleared up in a minute. But I have had a chance to put up mini polls, so we have 3 to go over at the moment. And the first one said, do you think that we are getting closer to Russia using nuclear weapons in Ukraine? It looks like 43% said no, Putin is just bluffing, 29% said maybe, and 28% said yes, it is escalating to that point. And on this one, I'll have to say that I'm going to have to go with the 28% that said it's escalating to that point. I don't think that Putin would hesitate to use nuclear weapons if he really starts to lose really, really badly, and it's going to end up with Russia having to completely pull out of Ukraine. But Enforcer, we've gone over this so many times, but what are your thoughts?
I would have to, of course, still side with the 44%, because I feel like this is a threat, and it's an empty one at that. Every single threat that the Russians have given out in this war has ended up never coalescing into reality. At the very beginning of this war, in case you all do not remember, when Putin announced the special military operation, let's actually see if we can pull that up. Putin announces special military operation. Let's pull it up. Let's see if Wikipedia has a translation of this address. Let's see here. A call to the Ukrainian people. Here we go. Here's the warning against intervention that I'm looking for. Whoever, and this was said on February 24th, whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so to create threats for our country, for our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history. Directly inferencing nuclear war like he's already done today. We are ready for any development of events. All necessary decisions in this regard have been made. I hope that I have been heard. That is almost the exact same thing that he said just hours ago in his address when he was saying that they were going to mobilize another 300,000 soldiers, and that he was entirely serious. He literally said that in his speech. He said, "I'm not bluffing." And that really sets a great precedent and a great message to the world that you're not bluffing, and you sit there and tell everyone you're not bluffing. If people took you seriously, I don't think you would have to tell everyone you're not bluffing. I think they would just believe you. But Putin's become such a joke at this point that no one believes him, and even he doesn't believe himself anymore. And so he's having to say, "I'm not the bluffing guys, I'm serious." So, considering that these kinds of threats have been made ever since the first minute of this war, I would have to say, once again, is just nothing but hype talk and fear. But still, the fact that he's threatening nuclear war against the West is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen, especially considering that the United States and the Western world can curb stomp the Russians in a conventional war, and right now, the Russians' excuse as to why the war is going terribly is that NATO soldiers are now in Ukraine and they're fighting for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians aren't even there anymore. And so with that...
Now, Enforcer, I want to add one more thing to it. We all know that Putin is a narcissist, he's an egocentric person, and for him to say out of his mouth that this is not a bluff when he's referring to nuclear weapons, that seems to suggest that people around him aren't taking him seriously about that threat, and he doesn't think that the West or anybody else is taking him seriously. So for him to say that is a narcissist, that indicates to me that he is going to try to prove that he means what he says.
To me, I believe that proves that he feels like power is slipping out of his hands. In my opinion, because having to go through the effort of saying something like that extra in your speech, like sitting there and saying something like, we're going to war, I'm not bluffing, that makes it seem like you're trying to assure people that you do have some kind of power and that there is something behind Russia. And that shows a large amount of a lack of confidence even on his own level. He doesn't even believe in Russia anymore. He doesn't even believe in his own authority or power internationally anymore, to the point that he's having to assure himself verbally and the rest of the world that he's not bluffing this time. I'm actually serious. And if you do that so many times, it just loses all of its strength. You may as well just give up at that point, because if you don't even believe yourself, who really is going to believe you? But with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And of course, I highly encourage everyone in the live chat to have a discussion on that, because Matthew brings up some fairly good points. And I, of course, feel like I'm bringing up some fairly good points. But it can go either way. Putin is a maniac, after all. And in the sensible and logical arena, it most likely will not amount to anything, but then again, we're dealing with an unsensible and illogical person, and so it could go in Matthew's direction, and things could get pretty bad. So make sure to discuss it in the live chat, because I'm sure that it will lead to some really interesting discussions. Once again, I ask that everyone keep it civil. If you do disagree with somebody, you don't have to call them an idiot. I get that plenty. I don't know why, and I just say, just be decent to each other. There's no reason to fight. At the end of the day, things will be the way they are, and our discussions about them will just be discussions. And so with that, we are on to the next poll, if we got one.
All right, and we do. We have two more to go. So the next one said, do you think that Russia's nuclear weapons are actually operational? It looks like 73% said yes, but only partially maintained. 18% said yes, fully operational, and 9% said no, they are not operational. Now for me, I would have to fall within the 73%. As we've seen from Russia's equipment, it's very old, and most of it very rusty. So I wouldn't rule out the nukes being rusty as well. If they go to fire them, they might, decide to blow up in the silo. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
One thing I have to say, let's see. One thing I have to say is that based off of a documentary I've seen before in the United States, of course, with its unlimited military budget compared to the rest of the world, it even has problems maintaining its nuclear arsenal as well, at least its land arsenal. I know the submarines are in great condition, but the actual silos on land, some of them are in worse for wear state, although they still have nuclear weapons in them. With that in mind, especially considering that that's a shortcoming of the United States, I know good and well that the Russians are not maintaining their nuclear arsenal at all. And if you look at the early history of the Russian Federation back in the 90s, the Russian Federation didn't have any money to maintain any of their nuclear arsenal. We had to pay Russia, the United States had to personally pay Russia to be able to get their nuclear submarines out of their ports that they were no longer fielding or operating, and then dismantle them for Russia, because Russia was not going to do anything about them. They were going to allow these submarines to just sink at their ports and then seep radioactive waste into the waters. And so in that regard, I know for certain, just based off that, logically, the rest of their arsenal was most likely poorly maintained or not maintained at all, and so a lot of it may not even be operational. But then again, that is just my assessment based off of historical precedent and what we know from the past, and that could be wrong. The Russians could have made most of their nuclear weapons operational, but considering that their military only has around a $60 billion yearly budget, there's just not a lot of room in there to maintain. Let's pull this up. Russian.
Although, Enforcer, while you're pulling that up, I will add this. I saw somebody in the live chat say it, and it's a really good point. They only need one to work to be devastating. They only need one missile to be fired. So while they may be rusty, how many do they have in total? You're pulling that up right now?
They have 6,257 of them. The United States has 5,550. But one thing you got to remember is that the United States is a nation with a GDP of $20 trillion per year, and not even our country can find the budget to maintain all 5,550 of our nuclear weapons. So the Russians, with a GDP 20 times smaller than ours, certainly does not have the money or the ability to actually maintain all 6,257 of them. And another
Or
thing,
expertise.
and that's very true. Expertise is probably missing heavily. Another thing is, that was a great point to bring up, that only one needs to work to be devastating. But we got to remember, the Patriot missile system can shoot down nuclear missiles, I believe, in certain instances. But let me pull it up to make sure. Can the Patriot missile system missile shoot down ICBMs? Let's see. In general, short-range tactical ABMs cannot intercept ICBMs even within range. Can a Patriot shoot down an ICBM? The Patriot is the only operational air defense system that can shoot down attacking missiles, according to the Army. So that is why we are not really too scared about a single missile, because, in case you all do not know, there are roving Patriot missile defense systems here in the United States that set up in some areas of, I guess you could say, the frontier or in Canada, that are set up to shoot down nuclear missiles launched by Russia that will be coming over the Arctic. We do not have... Go ahead.
Enforcer, quick question. When the missile actually gets close to impact, doesn't it split apart into multiple pieces, multiple warheads?
Some of them do. I believe the U.S. Trident does, if I remember correctly. But I don't know if the Russians have any similar nuclear weapons that split apart into multiple warheads. I think most of theirs are just solid one-piece warheads. But let's pull that up. Does the Russians have multiple tipped warheads? And let's see if we can get an answer to that. Let's see. What type of warheads does Russia have? Let's go here real quick. Let's try and find out. We're going into a deep dive into nuclear weapons, but considering that the nuclear threat came up again, I feel like it's a pretty good time. So, nuclear arsenal of Russia. The RS-28 Sarmat appears to be one of their larger fielded weapons. So let's check out the Sarmat, also called the Satan II. Very, very on the nose of the Russians, considering what Putin is. So let's see. It's one of the 6 new. Oh, it's new. So apparently it was unveiled in 2018. There must not be a lot of these in service or even that exist. And when you see that there's about, let's see, the warhead is 10 to 15 MIRVs.
Oh, there it is down there under the design section. It says, go down a little bit. It says a combination of warheads and several countermeasures. So I'm assuming that's decoys.
Countermeasures. Interesting. Oh, and then they show a castle bastion. Thanks, Wikipedia. Yes. That's a great countermeasure. But moving on from that, let's see. Sarmat has a short boost phase. But then again, we've got to remember, there are very few of these missiles probably in service, considering that they just came out in 2018 and the military only has a $50 to $60 billion budget in Russia. I would assume there is probably only a handful of these in service. So let's go back and try and find a more common missile. The previous R-36, since 2009, trying to read this real quick. It was heralded prompt global. Okay, so I think the R-36 appears to be the one that is more populous. So let's see if we can find a number for them. Let's see, mass, length, design, and service. The R-36M2 is still in service to this day. And became, let's see, let's go down to the design. Let's see the design of this little fella, and let's see what it can do. Let's look for the M2. Oh god, that's a lot of reading. I'm sorry, everyone. I don't want y'all to watch me read. This isn't the reading rainbow or anything, but let me see here. The 10 warheads on the post-boost vehicle are located on a special frame in 2 circles. So it does look like they have multiple warhead missiles. However, the question is, could a Patriot missile defense system shoot down this missile before it could separate its warheads, or could it shoot down each one of these warheads individually? That's a question that apparently the Army is pretty confident in. Regardless of the end result, it will be able to shoot down the warheads. But the question is, how many Patriot defense systems do we have? Patriot missile defense system. Now let's see if we get a number for the United States. So 1,106 launchers are in U.S. service, and 172 of those have been exported, and we have 10,000 missiles. And so each little, I guess you could say, MIM Patriot, carries around 4 missiles apiece. And so 4 times, well, actually, let's subtract the number first. 1,106 minus 172 for the ones that were exported. That gives us a total of 934 that are still in U.S. hands. Multiply that by a factor of 4. That means that at any given moment here in the United States, there are 3,736 missiles that are capable of shooting down Russian warheads that are flying in. Each one could be targeted individually to a separate warhead that came from a single missile. And so it seems that we actually are a little bit deficient if all of these are being launched at one time, which they most likely would, to shoot down all of them. But then again, 3,736, which is well over half of the Russian nuclear arsenal, is good enough that we could assume, if a decent amount of those missiles are not maintained, and it's like anything else in the Russian military, and most of them are not operational, we do have enough Patriot missile systems and missiles themselves to be able to shoot down most of the warheads before they could reach their target, which is...
Now, Enforcer, here's a question for you. I actually saw a video yesterday about it, but do you know the success rate of the THAAD system?
I do not actually. What is the... Let's pull it up real quick. Success rate
Yeah, pull it up to make sure I'm accurate, but I'm pretty sure I saw 50%. So it only shoots down 50% of what it detects.
THAAD has maintained a 100% success rate with 15 successful intercepts in 15 attempts. Well, that's pretty good. I don't think
it shoots down 100% of the missiles.
Apparently, it's had 15 attempts, and each attempt that was made, it made the intercept. So it has a 100% success rate, which in the military world is unheard of. Usually, it's somewhere around 50%.
That is unheard of.
But 100%. God, I wonder how much that thing costs, because that's got to be expensive to get a 100% success rate.
I'm not sure if I buy that, to be totally honest.
Honestly, I don't know if I would either. That may be a hype figure, but let's see here. This is from the Rocket.com website. So, let's see. Our role.
I think these might be the people that manufacture it. Maybe.
Nah, I don't think so. Rocket.com. I don't really know. I haven't heard of a company called Rocket. But how accurate does the THAAD work? Let's see. Fire an intercept following 16 consecutive successful intercept tests. So it looks like each time it's been launched and tested, it actually works, which is very interesting. 100% success rate sounds insane. I'm not sure if I want to believe that, actually, but if that is true, then we have the best weapon system in the world. Nothing is 100% accurate. Ever, and to think that this is 100% accurate, that's ungodly. But we can see a picture of a THAAD being used here, and also some people were bringing that up in the live chat that this is also I guess you could say, alternative to the Patriot system, and it appears that statistically it would be a little bit better. Let's check out the range on the Patriot. So let's see here. Also, real quick, let me check something. I'm trying to check the live chat real quick just in case we have any other information. It looks like they have... Oh, that's interesting. This is looks like a whole entire Patriot system being set up in the middle of a square. But let's move on down. Move on down, move on down. What is the success rate of a Patriot? That's a great question. Oh, man, I'm trying to find some more information. Sorry, everyone. We're trying to get as much information as possible about what these things can do. So, let's see here. Operational range. The Patriot systems, most likely the actual missiles the U.S. would use, would be the PAC-2s. So it looks like they have a range of around 190 miles. The THAAD actually has a range of around 120 miles. So it does have more reach.
Okay, now Enforcer, I think one thing on that 100% accuracy rate is it's not referring to ICBMs, I don't think.
Let me guess, it's probably referring to ballistic missiles.
I believe so. So it's not intercontinental ones.
Interesting. So, THAAD is kind of Missile Defense Agency. I didn't even know we had like an independent department for missile defense. That's new.
But anyways, Enforcer, we're rabbit holing big time.
Yeah, we're rabbit holing big time. I'm very sorry about that, everyone. But it does appear that the United States does have weapons that hypothetically could shoot down intercontinental ballistic missiles. Let me check real quick. Let me just type this in before we go, Matthew. Can THAAD, and also we're not leaving the stream. We're just moving on from this. So the U.S. began production. Let's see. Its stated range as a short to intermediate ballistic missile interceptor means that it is not designed to hit mid-course ICBMs, which can reach a terminal phase speeds of Mach 8 or greater. So apparently, the THAAD cannot shoot down an intercontinental ballistic missile once it's reaching the United States. I don't know if the Patriot can either, but this is a question we're going to have to look into a little bit more. Now people are saying the Aegis system, but due to time constraints, we won't be able to look into it a lot more, but still an interesting look at...
Might have to make a video about that topic.
Yeah, we might actually have to make a video about it, and y'all might see my mug on camera again. And so with that, we are on to the next poll, or if we want, Matthew, we can go ahead and start answering the questions.
So we can quickly address the two remaining polls. The next one said, do you think that Putin's military generals would stop him before nuclear weapons were launched? It looks like 45% said yes, it would be the catalyst for a coup. 33% said maybe, I don't know. And 22% said no, they would follow orders. Now on this one, I'm going to have to say maybe, I don't know, because I just don't know enough about the internal structure of his generals and the way it works with between them and Putin. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I have a feeling that if anything happened in Russia that was starting to get towards nuclear war, there would be someone to stop it. In case of y'all do not know, there's been a load of historical instances in the Soviet Union where the order was given to respond immediately to perceived U.S. nuclear missile strikes, preemptive missile strikes, that were not followed through because a single battery commander refused to follow the orders. There is a historical instance for that. I highly suggest y'all pull that up. It is there. There is documentation of it as well. So in that regard, I feel like someone would stop it, because to do a preemptive nuclear strike like the Russians most likely would pull off is unbelievable. It's unheard of in the history of the world, is to just go and immediately nuke a country without even escalating into a conventional war or anything for that matter. And so I do feel like someone would step up and stop it. So I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in the final poll of this segment, and this is going to be the last poll about nuclear weapons for the stream, so we don't overdo it. This question is, do you think NATO would respond if a tactical nuclear weapon were used in Ukraine? 79%, so an overwhelming majority say that yes, NATO would intervene. 15% said maybe, but I don't know. And 6% say no, we would not intervene. Now, while Ukraine is not in NATO as of yet, so Article 5 I don't think would apply, but I think we would get involved regardless. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I do have a pretty substantial feeling that NATO would get involved. The United States has already made a pledge to Ukraine that if any chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons are used within their boundaries, the United States would get involved directly, regardless whether that includes NATO or not. And so if something does happen, it may not be the entirety of NATO, because, for example, I feel like the Germans wouldn't exactly be on board with it. It would at least be the largest powerhouse in the West, pretty much, I guess you could say, the center of the Western world right now, the United States, that would step forward and come to Ukraine's aid. And of course, no one would really stand in their way. Most of Europe, if they hadn't already joined us, would be supporting us, even if they were not there. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. But I'm honestly not entirely sure if that would be an entire NATO response. Sometimes it seems like there are some countries that are on the fence, like Turkey. Turkey's a great example of a country that's on the fence with everything. And the Germans also seem to sometimes waffle a little. Of course, I respect them for giving support to Ukraine, and they did reaffirm that they were going to continue to give Ukraine support even today, but sometimes it seems like they wouldn't be willing to commit 100%. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, the poll fairly well. And with that, we are now on to the first question.
All right, and the first question goes to Bo Williams, who puts in a $100 donation and says, "May this money protect Ukrainian soldiers. May God watch over them."
And thank you so much for the massive support, and I do agree that hopefully Ukrainian soldiers will be protected from whatever comes their way. They've been doing a really good job so far, and hopefully God will protect them. And so with that, thank you so much for the support to this channel. It helps us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a very generous, once more, $100 donation from Tim. Hopefully I'm saying your last name properly. I'm going to try to go for it. Demoranville, I believe is how it's pronounced. But Tim, thank you very much for the support. He doesn't leave a comment, sadly, but we appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to it?
And of course, Tim, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support. It helps this channel to keep on running, and it helps us to cover this news every single night. And of course, without y'all's support, it wouldn't be possible. And so I got to thank you so much for the massive amount of support. You didn't leave a comment. Of course, it leaves us with nothing to really mention a lot or address, but still, the support says a lot, and it says that you want this channel to keep going. And so thank you so much once again. This channel and the Lee Spring Army will continue to move forward thanks to your support. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into our next segment of news.
And the last one of this segment goes to Makara, who puts in a $50 donation and says, "Here's some money to start a website and back up all the streams. You can't count on the YouTubes to preserve this content for posterity."
And thank you so much for the support, Makara. That is a pretty good idea. I don't know how much time and effort that would take, but it is an interesting idea nonetheless, and I think we might try and look into that and get that done sometime in the future, although I don't really know when. Just in case if y'all do not know, college, it's started to kind of pick up in the amount of time it's taking me to do things behind the scenes. Like yesterday, I actually ended up waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't have a single time to sit down and do anything, you know, I guess you could say like supplementary or secondary to anything else, all the way from 5 o'clock to 1 in the morning the next day. And so sadly, I don't know if I'd be able to find the time to do that, but it is still a pretty cool idea. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Makara, and thank you so much for helping these streams to keep on rolling thanks to your support. And also, you are a longtime member, an old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And so, once again for that, thank you so much. And so with that, everyone's favorite phrase, take a sip, we are now going to be moving on into our next bit of news, starting off in the northern Kharkiv area near our location unknowns. So, the first video, we saw one of those beautiful M270s in operation today. Once again, the bigger brother of the HIMARS. They can carry 12 HIMARS missiles instead of 6, and they do look pretty cool. And so here's the video. When you see it launching its missiles. And just look at him go. And so with that, I thank you so much once again. I actually saw something in the comments, Matthew. I'm getting stuck in loops in my head. I'm like a freaking computer.
Oh no!
But
it's the caffeine.
Yeah, it's the freaking caffeine, and I'm hardly even drinking any tonight. Honestly, I'm still overdosed from last night, and I'm trying to get off of the caffeine.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like I've hardly drank any caffeine tonight at all. Like, you know, like the giant amount of busy I pour. I drank like 2 sips of it, and that's it. And I've been running off of that so far perfectly fine. So with that, it's great to see that the N270 is still in operation in Ukraine, and that there are actual examples there. Unlike the HIMARS, we have no idea how many M270s are in Ukraine, but we did see one, and one is enough. And so we are now moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Azov battalion has been released, and none other than the actual commander of the Azov. The guy who had the blonde hair and the mustache at the beginning of the war, who used to give us updates on the situation within the Azov stall, he was released today, and we saw him speaking to President Zelenskyy here on this video.
Денис.
Слава Україні, пане президенте. У нас все добре, стан здоров'я задовільний. Дякую вам і всій команді за те, що ви зробили.
And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that all Azov prisoners have been released. But I'm about to say something here in a second once we show a little bit more of the prisoners being released in this location unknown that I've kind of noted today, and I think it's something that a lot of people have not mentioned. But with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we see that the Ukrainians have gotten a new night vision drone, and this time, one of the fluffy kind. And so here's the video of this bird that they have.
Тренировочка началась. Трепещите орки. У нас уже боевые
It's an owl. It's an owlet, I guess you could call it, perched on top of a hand grenade. Well, that honestly, that would be a cool division patch. That owl like hanging onto a grenade. That would be pretty cool.
They can train the owls to go drop them on them.
It's a lot more successful than the ghetto bombs on strings that the Russians are using.
Yeah, anything would be better than that.
Yeah, even the owls are starting to support Ukraine. And so that's the end of that little cute video of that sweet little owl baby. And we're now moving on into the next video, and this is where we're going to start talking about those prisoner exchanges. We saw an even larger amount of prisoners being returned to Ukraine from the Azovstal units, specifically the 36th Infantry, well actually the 36th Naval Infantry Brigade, and also the Azov Battalion itself. And so here's the video of these vans returning with these prisoners. It's great to see that the Ukrainian prisoners are finally coming home, but something very odd to me, and something I think I've never seen anyone say today on the news, and I thought I would throw this around as an idea to all of y'all, is that this may be Russia's attempt at ending this war. Notice that we didn't hear of an exchange occurring, we just heard that the Azov prisoners had been released. And also, real quick to add in something extra, which we will get to later in the international news segment, the British volunteers that were sentenced to death in the DPR were also released today. All of them were released, and they were flown to Saudi Arabia, where they'll then be transported back to their countries of origin. This is all starting to look like the Russians are attempting to try and end this war. They're going to mobilize the additional 300,000 soldiers regardless to bolster their positions the best they can, although we know it won't be much, that they currently hold in Ukraine. They're going to hold the fake referendums. Of course, all of them are going to come back as, yes, we want to be a part of Russia. They'll annex it, and they'll have given back the prisoners to Ukraine, which is a war-ending thing. Usually whenever you give back just the massive prisoners without needing an exchange, apparently BSG Wolf actually said there was an exchange, but I have not...
I wonder who we gave up to get those two guys.
I wonder if
was it somebody really nasty?
If it was an exchange, also it looks... Wait a minute, hang on. Zenith Dawn said they got our highest ranked POW, which apparently was that Russian arms dealer guy, you know, like the Merchant of Death or whatever. So let's see here. Let's see. So it looks like apparently everyone's saying that they did exchange a pretty high-profile Russian POW for all of these POWs that were returned to them. And I did not hear that earlier today, and so the image that was starting to come together to me is that it looked like the Russians were going to try and pseudo-end the war, kind of like they did in 2014 in the Donbass. Everything kind of solidified around 2016 and remained that way ever since. And so that's what it looked like to me, but apparently it was just a normal prisoner exchange. So we will not continue on with that line of reasoning, considering that it is unfounded. And so with that, we're moving on to our last bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians doing mine clearing the right way. Also, we gotta mute this. When we see a Russian grenade down there on the ground, and the Ukrainians are using the old stick and plastic water bottle trick to get the mine and get rid of it. We now see that they put the mine in the bottle, and now they've set it on the side of a road, and they're tossing something onto it, which then blows it up, and their job is complete. We now see them wandering around another field, And now they're shooting the mines. Very interesting mine clearing tactics. Somewhat unorthodox, but it is working. And as long as it's working, I guess that's all that counts, right? And so with that, that's the end of that bit of our location unknown news. And we're now going to be moving over into Kharkiv to cover some of our northern Kharkiv news. Starting off with the Ukrainians finding another large cache of weapons somewhere in the liberated areas and showing it off to the public. And so, here's the video. We can see here some Russian trucks, some Russian crates. We see them showing off more crates. And we see in each of them some pretty sizable rounds that appear, some mortar rounds at least.
А що тут знаходиться? Ось ці от
Морковок. Это слушать их можно через радиостанцию.
А, це радіостанції, да?
Вот много. Цинков тоже. Вот. 17-е. Кучу оставили.
Here in my garage, just got this brand new mortar.
Це воги, да?
I mean, I see some 40 millimeter grenades, probably launched out of an HES. Just loads of supplies. It's just endless amounts. They even have the spam cans, which I just love because you know a gun collector has gone too far down the rabbit hole when they sit there and they say spam cans like it's a divine right kind of thing. Yeah, I got myself a Mosin with a couple of spam cans. Like they'll say it like that. Like you're supposed to like.
I've never heard anybody say that ever.
I've actually heard a decent amount of people say that whenever I'm going around looking for historic guns. They all like for some reason. The spam cans are coveted. I don't understand why. It's just another way of packaging the rounds. But for some reason, some people find the spam cans to just be coveted. Like pretty much they would build altars to these things if they could. You see that they have some spare tire irons laying around. Sadly, I don't know what that is exactly supposed to be. Also, looks like they have one of those 68 millimeter grenade launchers.
А яка особливість? Ти казав, що він стріляє касетами.
Ну, я не минометчик, тут больше минометчики подскажут как. Но то, что я знаю, то, что можно заряжать и кассетами, 82-е сюда подходят.
Pretty old grenade launcher, too. It looks like it has been poorly kept. We can also see some really poor condition rounds as well. Just look at that. Like, look at the corrosion on these things, Matthew. Ew!
Dang. That's nasty.
This is the kind of round that would end up nearly killing that gun review guy on YouTube. I forgot his name. What was it? Demolition Ranch?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I forgot who it was, but I feel like this would have been the quality of round.
Oh wait, it was oh man, what's his name? It's
the other guy. It's not Demolition Ranch. Demolition Ranch is the other fella. We're thinking about some other guy, and I'm sure
it's Kentucky Ballistics.
Yes, it's Kentucky Ballistics. And so I think this is one of the rounds that he fired that blew up inside of his gun. Also, it's good to see that he did end up being okay from that, although it was a near-death experience, and he's now recovered and he's back to doing what he does.
Вот написано. Да. ПГ-7С. Это видишь?
О, это 150 вольта.
See them showing off more ammunition.
С зарядом.
Взрывают на
аккумулятор танковый.
Так, ну, тут
ленты открой.
Ленты, да, коробы.
Там где полные, есть пустые, ну ленты пустые, а где полная, тяжелая, 250 штук.
Вот. 7,62 на 54.
And we can see them unboxing more rounds. Just loads of crap. Just loads of it. It's endless. And also, Matthew, some people are saying Hickok 45. Hey there, everyone.
Hey guys, Hickok 45 here.
Hey everyone, Hickok 45 here, and I've got this brand new 45 caliber revolver, and we're gonna smoke some pot. Boom! Boom! Oh, I just love these 45 calibers. Thanks to Federal Firearms for getting this for us, and look at the collection we have today. I mean, Hickok 45 is a character. I like him a lot, but anyways, we're going to cut this video short. Y'all can get the picture that there is a lot of crap that the Ukrainians got in the single storage building alone, and of course the Russians left it all as a sign of goodwill. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this clip of news and further to the front lines, where we saw Ukrainian forces on the move with the crosses painted on. Also, it's got music. Well, we can see one of the Ukrainian tanks passing by with some plows on the front. We can also see another Ukrainian tank. And we see that the Humvees is pulled over on the side of the road to wave to the tanks as they pass by. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and once again, great to see that the Ukrainians are on the move, and it looks like they're pretty well organized. So with that, we're going to be moving to our next clip, where we can see that the Russians have given the Ukrainians some more brand new equipment in slightly used condition. Starting off, we can see them driving a Kamaz truck back to Ukrainian lines that has been captured in perfect condition. After that, we can then see a somewhat worse for wear BMP-2 now being driven back. Also, it's missing the barrel. That's a great sign. The Russians, Vadim, shoot the gun! What gun? Oh. Oh, quick, abandon the tank! But it's still great to see the Ukrainians capture both of the vehicles intact, and will be able to use them for themselves. And so with that, we are on to the next bit of news further down the line, where we can then see the Ukrainians firing RPGs at the Russians like they're small artillery pieces. And so without further ado, here's the clip of that. We can see them aiming them with a very high amount of elevation.
Wow, they were really like silent.
Yeah. I think it may just be the audio on this little microphone. Honestly.
Oh yeah, I was about to say.
Because I've seen other videos where the camera gets tinnitus from listening to the sound. And so with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, interesting to see the Ukrainians using their weapons like this. Also, another thing real quick, I just saw something in the live chat that I'm going to have to go back and address real quick. Someone said, oh, Dissent Hickok 45 may have to change news sources.
I saw that.
Yeah, we literally just said Hickok 45 is quite the character and we like him. I don't even know how in the world you understood that way. And I like to try and be as calm and reasonable with things, but when I clearly say something and then you interpret it as the opposite, I don't know where in the world you are headspace wise, but apparently not in the right place. So with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front line and towards the area of Oskol, where we saw today the Kadyrovites tried to make a propaganda video. It looks like they were trying to get back into the swing of TikTok, and it looks like it didn't really go too well. I'll let y'all see what happens. They're doing Kadyrovite things, and then they are not doing Kadyrovite things.
They're trying to play it off.
Yeah. What in the world? This guy sounded like a rabid dog over here. This way. Listen to that. It sounded like a dog.
Their voices are cracking. They're like all messed up.
Hang on. You can clip those together and make it sound like a rabid dog barking at you behind a fence. So with that. Oh, man. They all start walking off the camera defeated because they're like, man, we can't catch a break anymore. And so that's the end of the video. And once again, great to see the Kadyrovites are barking like dogs in their videos. Very weird, but I guess that's what they do. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on to our last bit of news for this segment in the area of Lyman, where we saw some more destroyed Russian positions, showing that the Ukrainians are still handing it to the Russians, regardless of what the Russians would want you to think. And so here's the video. A lot of destruction here. That, well, at one point was a BTR, and it's no longer a BTR, it's something else. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that is a pretty interesting little bit of an end result that the Ukrainians put on that little camp near Lyman. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next segment of news, which will cover the entirety of the Southern Front, our international news, which we have some today. We will be talking in brief about Tajikistan invading Kyrgyzstan. But before we get to all of that, we are going to take another pause to address some polls and also 3 questions from the chat. After we do that, we'll then continue back on with our last segment of news. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
Alright folks, and as the old saying goes, we're entering our second to last question segment of the stream, and we have 2 polls to address. The first one said, had you heard about the 2 American prisoners that were released today by Russia? 57% said, yes, I had heard previously, and 43% said, no, I did not know. So it looks like it's almost evenly split. But Enforcer, do you have anything to add?
I would say the U.S.-Russia prisoner swap, I would have to say, honestly, it doesn't really seem like a fair trade. Well,
oh wait, that's the next one. That's the next one, Enforcer. This was a old poll.
Real quick, can you reread that one again? Because I was looking at this one, I was like, it's like the wordage is kind of off, but it sounds similar.
It was just basically, had you heard about it or not? And it looked like about 43% had not.
I actually, of course, since I made the news, I did hear about it. So with that, I hope I answered the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to the second one, this one said, do you think that the U.S.-Russia prisoner swap was an even trade? It looks like 59% said, I don't know, 23% said, yes, it was fair, and 17% said, no, the U.S. got screwed over. Now, without knowing for certain exactly who got swapped from America, I couldn't really answer this question, so I said I did not know. But for the people that do know, apparently it looks like more people said it was fair than that we got screwed over.
I would honestly have to say, I was going to answer it a second ago, but now that I'm rereading it, I wouldn't really know if it was fair or not either. I don't even know who was exchanged exactly in this prisoner of war exchange. All I know is that eventually the British foreign volunteers were returned to Saudi Arabia along with some Americans, and the Azov battalion, the remainder of it, I believe, was sent back to Ukraine. So I don't know who was exchanged for that to happen, but with that, I hope I addressed that poll fairly well, because I'm also going to fall in the large majority that says I don't really know. And so with that, we are on to the next, well, actually not the next poll, I think that was the last one. We are on to the first question of this segment.
All right, and the first super chat of the segment goes to Mark, who puts in a very generous $75 donation and says, here's a contribution for the presidential and lawyer fund for the enforcers. I think you need to drop this to every second day or once a week to stay sane. And thank you very much, Mark, for the contribution to the lawyer fund and also the presidential fund.
And thank you so much for the support to the presidential fund. As president of the United States, I'm going to make sure that the United States retains its position as one of the leading forces of the world, and make sure, of course, like every politician promises, but almost none of them deliver on, that there is a green in your pockets and life is good. Pretty much everyone wants to wish prosperity. I think the problem is that most people don't really know how to get prosperity done. Hopefully I'll be one of the few that can actually figure that out and implement it. So with that, moving on from that, I thank you so much once again, Mark, for being around, of course, forever. You're part of the Discord Old Guard. And also for also I'm going to have to address something here in the live chat. Let me make sure to thank you, Matthew. I was actually about to address that. I was like, what? But anyways,
it's just a bot.
Yeah, moving on. Back to what Mark said. Of course, it is great to have people support us well into our future. Hopefully, y'all will be around for the 2040 presidential election, and hopefully, I will actually run and win. I would love to see what I could do as president of the United States, and hopefully, it would be something that is good enough that I could get in the history books for the rest of all time. In case if y'all don't know, that's kind of how I will measure my success, although I will not be alive to see it happen, is if I was a good enough president to get my own page in the books about how the nation was improved under my administration versus the other times in our nation's history. Hopefully so. But anyways, with that, I did hear you say something ludicrous, Mark. You said, drop this to every other day, didn't he? Reread that part real quick, Matthew.
He did. He said drop it to, let's see here. He said to every second day or once a week to stay sane. And apparently Mark thinks we're insane, which we do it every night.
Oh my god. I'm not insane, as my eye twitches. I'm not insane, and I love that you care for us, Mark, and you want us to stay sane. But I made a promise that we were going to cover this war every single day of every single week of every single month until this war ended. Of course, we take Mondays off, but I want to make sure that y'all have a place to go almost every day of the week where y'all can get the last 24 hours of news and the best way possible. And of course, that's huge. That's huge, I guess you could say, stoking of my own ego. And Matthew's coming from me saying it's the best possible. There are a lot of channels out there that cover the Ukraine war, and a lot of them do it in a pretty good way. It's just that, here's the thing. My honest inclination is to think I am a hack. Because that's just how I work. That's how I always make sure that I'm getting better at stuff. Because if you think you're great, then you just never improve, and you never really think about things, and you get complacent. So I always think in my head, and I don't know if Matthew thinks the same way, but I always am sitting there thinking, like, after every stream, gee, I'm such a hack. Like, oh, man. And so when y'all sit there and tell me, no, you're not, I eventually got beat down by that so much, because every time I'd say something like that that's a little depreciating, everyone would be like, no, it's great. And so I just started taking it and going with it. But still in the back of my head, I do get a decent bit wrong. And of course, y'all still enjoy it nonetheless, and it's usually corrected on stream. But I thank you so much for enjoying the stream nonetheless. And I thank you so much for caring for us. But still, I want to make sure that y'all have news to go to every single day of the week. Regardless whether it's actually high quality or not, at least it is the news. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $40 donation from Colleen Emsley, who does not leave a comment. But Colleen, I think you did this as well last night. We would love it if you'd leave us a comment of some sort, even just a simple question. We'd love to address something in exchange for the support, but thank you very much for it. And Enforcer, I'm sure, wants to add a few words again.
And of course, I thank you so much for the support. It helps out this channel a massive load, and without it, we wouldn't be able to run. Like when I say that, I think it almost loses its strength if I say it too many times. But that's really the way the channel runs, is through y'all's support. And so I got to thank you so much once again for helping us out so much in helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the super chat fairly well. Of course, you didn't leave a comment, but the support does say a lot in its own right. And so with that, we are on to the last one of the segment, and then we'll be moving into the final bit of news.
All right, and the last one of the segment goes to White Lightning 777, who puts in a $30 donation and says, even if a Patriot missile successfully shoots down a nuke, it's still no good. There is severe radiation, but no explosion. Nonetheless, lots of people will eventually die.
Now, that's a question I have had. Is if a nuclear missile is struck, well, a nuclear warhead is struck in flight, my honest belief is that it probably wouldn't cause too much radiological damage, because the uranium or whatever kind of material that's being used in the warhead will not have exploded, and it's not, I guess you could say, active. That's why you can take a nuclear bomb and stand right beside it and nothing will happen to you, is because while it is slightly radioactive, it's only going to be radioactive extremely radioactive for the short amount of time that it's actually, I guess you could say, undergoing nuclear fission, during the explosion. Then afterwards, the radiation actually subsides quite quickly, just within the course of a few weeks. So in that regard, I don't think it would be that radioactive. It's not going, like, one thing I think that has been misrepresented in the modern world is how devastating nuclear weapons are. Of course, they are incredibly devastating. You can destroy entire cities with a single nuclear weapon. But if you look at cities, they're actually cities like Hiroshima right here. Look at that. It's a whole modern city rebuilt from the ground up. And Nagasaki, further down the coast, right over here, You can see that both of these cities were searched completely. You will hardly see a single remnant in either city of their past. If I drop y'all down right here, you can't even tell that this was once the site of ground zero of the only attack, one of the only 2 attacks that occurred on an actual city in wartime by atomic or nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are not like the Fallout world. Fallout, like the Fallout game series, would make you think that once a nuke hits an area, it's just completely screwed. It will never recover. But surprisingly enough, they do. You can even see full, lush, green-growing parks in the area where the nuclear bomb once leveled. So I feel like it would cause a decent amount of damage. I don't feel like it would be as bad as people think it is, even if they were shot down midair and it was just the, I guess you could say, the radioactive material within the nuclear weapon that kind of spread through the air. It wouldn't be reacting. It wouldn't have anything to react with. And so I think it will largely subside. But then again, that's just my opinion. I'm not exactly a nuclear physicist or a nuclear engineer, so I'm kind of working off of my layman's knowledge of it. So take it with a grain of salt, as everyone loves their side of salt with everything I give. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, at least in my opinion. But then again, take it with a grain of salt. I could be wrong on that. But I think we are on to the last question of this segment, or that was the last one.
So I believe that, so we have one more to go, actually, I think. But nonetheless, we're going to another one because I can't remember. The next one is from Mark. Mark puts in another $75 super chat, and thank you very much, Mark, for the continued support. He says, by the way, I used to be a CEO of a company with offices in Minsk and Kyiv.
Interesting.
Wait a minute, Mark? No, I think I asked in the live chat, but I don't think he saw it. Was it a car company? That's what I want to know.
Was it Lada?
Oh, definitely not Lada. I'm thinking maybe
Lada.
BMW.
That would be interesting to hear, and if you would be willing to share with us that information, please don't do it if you feel like it may be compromising a little bit of your security, which is of course
I take it back. That might be doxing yourself.
Yeah,
I take it back.
Yeah, because honestly, there's not a lot of CEOs out there, so yeah, don't let us know if you want to let us know. Let us know over a Discord DM or something that's a lot more private, where we can only see it, so that way we can satiate our curiosity, but also not have you put onto someone's list out there in the internet world. So with that, I thank you for the massive amount of support once again, Mark. And I didn't know that you apparently used to be a CEO of a company with offices in Minsk and Kyiv. I'm assuming not Minsk and Kyiv exclusively. I'm sure that there were offices elsewhere around the world, but that is really interesting to hear. And it does pique my curiosity as to what company that would be. But if you feel like that would kind of dox yourself, make sure not to say it, because I wouldn't want you to kind of get found out for that. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the massive support, Mark, and I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we have now reached the end of this question segment, and we're moving into our last bit of news, starting off in the Severodonetsk area, moving down the rest of the front in Ukraine, and then we'll be going international. We'll be going abroad to countries like Saudi Arabia and Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, some of those stand series countries that are always brought up. So moving on into the area of Severodonetsk, we did see today that a Ukrainian peon was firing off into the distance. Once again, I think peons are kind of cool. So with that, here's the video. You can see the peon loading. Woo!
Вот так вот! Привет кацапам! Армате ведь бей!
Man, those peons are just fun to watch. And of course, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that Ukrainian artillery is still being levied in the area and hopefully hitting the Russians pretty well. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the area of Soledar, or at least in the general area, where we saw a Russian Bev 3 being destroyed by a Mavic 3. I don't know what a Mavic 3 looks like. I know what the Mavic 2 looks like. So what is the Mavic 3? The Mavic 3 looks a lot like the Mavic 2. Going to be honest. I don't really see a lot of difference. So with that...
that's the Gucci one.
Oh, this is the Gucci gang one.
That's the new one.
Honestly, in this picture, Matthew, it looks like a spacecraft, and it looks like the cameras are where the cockpit is.
Yeah, it really does. That's the I think that's the Cine, the one with the really nice like Hasselblad camera on it. They probably don't have that one though, because that would be sort of pointless to have the really high-end camera on it.
Probably. And so with that, we are now going to move on to watching the video of it getting destroyed. Also, Matthew, I did see the message. We can now see this BMP-3, of course, clearly abandoned, but the Ukrainians are going to make sure that it stays abandoned. The first bomblet fell behind the turret, but we can see smoke coming out of the BMP now. Now see another bomblet being dropped onto the rear infantry carrying compartment. And we now see a small fire beginning, which is disastrous for any kind of vehicle. We can now see the black smoke of death and a large explosion come from the BMP-3, showing us that it is in fact in the process of dying.
As the Russian BMP-3 begins to vaporize, the Ukrainians will find a new source of life.
I can't do it well anymore. I'm sorry, everyone. When I got hoarse, it's kind of thrown off my voice a little bit, and so it's hard to do impressions anymore. But we'll see if it recovers eventually, and I can do a good David Attenborough again, although some people think that's King Charles. You see the BMP continuing to explode, and with that, that's the end of the video. And it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still destroying Russian armored personnel carriers wherever they may be, and ensuring that the Russians will never be able to get any more mileage or use out of them again. And so with that, we're now going to be moving further down the front lines, all the way down to the Donetsk region, where we saw today that a Russian T-72 had been destroyed by a mine and was sitting on the side of the road. Ooh, that's some music that's scary. But when you see the T-72 right there, you see a little bit of damage to it. We can also see another one explode right there. So with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out T-72s with mines. Speaking of this entire area, of course, y'all know, the Donetsk area is the Maginot Line practically, so there won't be a lot of action or movement there. And up here in the Soledar and Seversk area, we haven't seen a lot of action here either. It appears that things are remaining largely stagnant in these areas of the front lines, and as far as we know, it will stay this way for quite some while. The southern front is, of course, the same. But moving on down into the Kherson area, we only got one video today, and that video is of a failed swimming attempt of a Russian T-62 falling into the Inhalets River after a failed bridge crossing. We can see that right there. We can also see the somewhat sunken bridge that once crossed the Inhalets. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and pretty nice to see that the Ukrainians are still thwarting Russian planes wherever they're happening. Of course, as we can see, not a lot of news came out of the southern front, the Kherson area, or the DPR and LPR areas, and so as far as we can tell, things in these areas are starting to subside a little bit. But with that, we are now going to be moving out of Ukraine and on into our international news, where I can finally show you all the clip of the British prisoners on a plane flying to Saudi Arabia. And so without further ado, here's the video of these two prisoners.
Hi, it's Kozak Gundy, Aidan Aslan and Sean Pinner. We just want to let everyone know that we're now out of the danger zone and we're on our way home to our families and whatnot. Not just us, there was also in total 10 foreigners that were in captivity. We're going to be pretty quiet in regards to media stuff until we get things sorted out and whatnot. We just want everyone to know the good news, etc. So thanks to everyone that's been supporting us and whatnot. So it's really muchly appreciated. Like, really.
So with that, it's great to see that the British prisoners have been released along with several other foreigners. From what we could tell, there was 10 of them, and of course, it's great to know that they're finally going to be back in Western hands and they're not going to be tortured or mistreated by the Russians in their prisoner of war camps. And so with that, we are now moving finally on our way to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. As you all know, there is still a war going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and there's an additional war occurring now in between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Now, if I went over all of the wars that were going on in this world right now, it's actually quite an extensive list. There's a war going on in between Colombia and the cartels in the I guess you could say in the highlands of Colombia. There is a bit of a civil war going on in Burma, or Myanmar as it's called these days, in between the Myanmar police and also, I guess you could say, local revolutionaries, if you like to call them that, where there is a war going on in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, of course the largest one as of right now, the war between Ukraine and Russia, and of course loads of wars going on, kind of in, I guess you could say, the Central African area. There's always some kind of a, I guess you could say, an issue there, to say the least. There are, I believe, still rebels in the Democratic Republic of the Congo that are fighting government forces there. But the one we want to focus on today is Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, as these are stand series countries and generally fall under Russia's ilk in terms of their sphere of influence and who kind of gets to say in how things go there. And apparently the Russians are so powerless that conflict is now erupted in between the Kyrgyzstanis and the Tajikistanis, as we can see on video today, as the Kyrgyzstani soldiers fired at the soldiers of Tajikistan. Tajikistan is apparently the offender in this war and is invading Kyrgyzstan, and when you see here in this video, this Kyrgyzstan forces try and repel the invasion. And so with that, we're now going to move on to our second clip, showing once again more border guards firing back towards the Tajikistanis. Wait a minute, hang on. It's a duplicate. Dagnabbit. I'm sorry, everyone. It looks like I got a duplicate of the videos. Actually, that is literally the exact same link. So it looks like I screwed up there. Sorry about that, everyone. But there is an ongoing conflict in between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and it appears that as each day goes by, it's starting to warm up a little bit more and more, and we haven't seen the Russians step in and intervene under any means whatsoever, and that's usually what they do in these stand series countries, but we haven't seen it yet. And so with that, we have now covered all of the news there is today. And so finally, we're going to be returning to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 211 of the war. And once the speech has concluded, we'll then be moving on into a question segment for the rest of the night. And so, without further ado, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Українки, ми повертаємо додому наших людей. Щойно завершився обмін. Сьогодні у нас 215 хороших новин, 215. Це однозначна перемога для нашої держави, для усього нашого суспільства, а головне – для 215 родин, які зможуть побачити своїх близьких в безпеці. Герой України Євгеній Бова, Герой України Лев Пашко, Герой України Денис Прокопенко. Загалом 108 бійців Азову, загалом 188 героїв Азовсталі і Маріуполя. 8 поранені під час російського теракту в Оленівці. Загалом 215 героїв. Це воїни Нацгвардії, нашої армії, військово-морських сил, прикордонники, поліцейські, тероборонівці, працівники Служби безпеки України та інші. Дмитро Козацький, знаменитий Орест, фотограф з Азовсталі, Микола Кущ і Костянтин Нікітенко. Бойовики засудили їх на смертну кару. Катерина Поліщук, Пташка, Мар'яна Мамонова, Валентина Зубко, Яна Шумовецька, Зоряна Репецька, Анастасія Черненка. Ми пам'ятаємо про усіх наших людей і намагаємось врятувати кожного українця. В цьому сенс України, наша сутність. Цим ми відрізняємось від ворога. Ми цінуємо кожне життя і обов'язково зробимо все, щоб врятувати усіх, хто перебуває в російському полоні. Ця операція готувалась доволі довго і в обміні є кілька складових. Перша складова – ми обміняли одного фаната Росії на 200 воїнів. Спочатку нам пропонували повернути 50 наших людей в обмін на одного з тих, хто перебував в слідчому ізоляторі Служби безпеки України. Ми говорили, наполягали, число 50 зросло до 200. Вони вже в Україні. Я вважаю, це хороший результат, хоча навіть більше, ніж 200, бо серед звільнених українок є ті, хто готується стати мамою. І я особливо щасливий, що вдалося зараз повернути їх в Україну. Віддати Медведчука за справжніх воїнів не шкода. А він пройшов всі слідчі дії, які передбачені законодавством. Україна отримала від нього все, що необхідно для встановлення правди в рамках кримінальних проваджень. Друга складова. Окрім 200 воїнів, ми повернули ще 5 бойових командирів, за яких довелось поборотись найбільше і найдовше, найскладніше. Їм загрожувало найжорстокіше. 5 супергероїв. В обмін на них ми віддали 55 тих, хто не заслуговує ані жалю, ані співчуття, ані взагалі будь-яких слів, тих, хто воював проти України, і тих, хто зрадив Україну, тих, хто нам з вами точно не потрібен. Україна домовилась з Туреччиною. Я говорив про це з президентом Ердоганом, що 5 наших командирів, які звільняються з полону, перебуватимуть в повній безпеці, в комфортних умовах і під особистою протекцією президента Туреччини на час до кінця війни. Але ми забезпечимо їхнім родинам можливість з ними бачитись. Сергій Волинський, Святослав Паламар, Денис Прокопенко, Олег Хоменко, Денис Шлега. Ще раз дякую президенту Ердогану. І, звичайно, ми допомогли нашим друзям. Це питання честі для України, питання нашої вдячності за допомогу нашій державі. Нам вдалося звільнити 10 іноземних громадян, які перебували в російському полоні. Свого часу ми обговорювали це з Борисом Джонсоном. Він звертався по сприяння з американськими друзями. Тепер додому повернуться 5 громадян Великої Британії, 2 громадянина Сполучених Штатів Америки, 1 громадянин Марокко і громадянин Швеції, 1 громадянин Хорватії. Ворог призначив їм вирок – довгий термін ув'язнення чи смертну кару. Ми врятували їм життя. Всі вони повернуться додому за посередництва Саудівської Аравії. Щиро вдячні за допомогу усім, хто долучився. І хочу назвати тих людей, завдяки кому ми маємо сьогодні ці 215 хороших новин. З українського боку питанням звільнення займається достатньо потужна група, нею керують 4. Керівник Офісу Єрмак, керівник нашої розвідки Буданов, голова Служби безпеки Малюк і Рустем Умеров. А також дякую їх команді Дмитру Усову, омбудсмену Лубенцю, міністру Монастирському. Дякую вам, хлопці, за цей український успіх. Вже завтра представимо і деяких інших учасників нашої групи, яка працює заради порятунку наших людей з полону. Представимо також більше деталей цього обміну. Дочекайтесь, будь ласка, відповідного брифінгу. Ще раз дякую усім, хто реалізував цю перемогу для України. Вітаю усіх наших захисників, наших захисниць, які повертаються додому. Пам'ятаємо про кожного і кожну.
Слава Україні!
And so with that is the end of President Zelensky's speech here on day 211 of the news, and that also wraps up our news segment for the night. If you have enjoyed and you're here for the news segment alone, thank you so much for watching, and please make sure to subscribe as these streams do run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays where we take the day off. And so, once again on that note, I thank everyone who was just here for the news for watching, and the fun has only just begun, as we're now moving into the question segment. We're going to answer all of the Super Chats that have been sent in tonight, all of the Super Chats that will be sent in tonight, and also as many live chats as we can. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, so for the final question segment of the night, we only have one poll left to address, and the question was, did you expect Russia to fully mobilize their military instead of a partial mobilization of their reserves? It looks like 48% said, yes, I expected full mobilization, 31% said, I did not know what to expect, and 21% said, no, I expected they would not. So on this one, I have to say that me personally, I expected them to fully mobilize, so I was kind of shocked to see that they only partially did so, but nonetheless, it's still very significant. So Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would honestly have to say the partial mobilization may as well be the full mobilization. Full mobilization only occurs in the wars like World War II, where the entire country is involved in a massive war, like for example with Nazi Germany, where it's spanning thousands of miles, and so you require pretty much the entirety of your civilian manpower to man that front. However, in Ukraine, considering that you can only put so many troops into a front line this size without overcrowding it, 300,000 soldiers in a partial mobilization of the reservists, which may as well be civilians at this point, that may as well be total mobilization for the size and scale that this war is at. So while it's technically not full mobilization, it somewhat is. And so I'm still somewhat surprised that they didn't just mobilize the entire military and start going into maximum overdrive, but you can still see why, because there's that domestic side of things like we see now that leads to just unbelievable amounts of unrest when anything is even starting to head in that direction. And so with that, I hope I was able to address that poll fairly well. And what are your opinions on it again, Matthew?
So pretty much, I've already expressed mine on it. I would have to say that. Let me read it one more time, as I'm in the midst of something else. Did you expect Russia to fully mobilize? So I have to say that I did expect them to fully mobilize, but they ended up not doing so. So I pretty much said everything I want to say about it. So Enforcer, unless you have anything else to add, we are moving on to our super chats.
All right, and so with that, let's get on to the first question of the last segment of the night.
All right, and real quick, I'm going to circle back to one super chat that I already read off earlier. Colleen said that she did send in a message, but it didn't attach to the super chat. So revisiting that $40 donation from Colleen Emsley, she says, Enforcer is a match to my handsome son-in-law. Sorry, but no photos. Not sure why it didn't come through, though.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Colleen, and thank you very much for the kind compliment. And a lot of people have showered both Matthew and me with compliments, but honestly, I gotta say, Matthew is more deserving of the compliments being showered because no one else looks like Matthew Broderick rather than Matthew himself. So I can understand why everyone's like, oh, look at him, but still, a very kind compliment for you to throw at me. And I thank you so much. It's interesting here that you have a son-in-law that looks a lot like me, and are you sure that isn't me? Let's discuss. But of course, with that, thank you so much once again for the wonderful support, Colleen, and thank you for throwing that in because that's an actual interesting tidbit, and also I appreciate the kind words as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And next up, Kaltenberg puts in a $20 super chat and says, "Yeehaw!"
And yeehaw! And thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. And I love that everyone kind of picked up on the yeehaw. Why in the world did you start doing that, Matty? I forgot why you did that.
Somebody put it in a super chat, and instead of just reading it off like lame-like, I decided just to go full out and do that.
Well, honestly, it's done very well because everyone's loved it, and it's funny how a lot of people throw it into super chats and questions now. In general, it's almost like I guess you could say, the war cry of the Lee Spring Army in a way. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Kaltenberg. You are an old guard member, and of course, I appreciate you so much in helping us daily in keeping these streams running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again. Also, Mr. Me said, are you married? And I'll tell you, no. I won't go any further into it, but no, I'm actually not. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Somebody said Matthew's like the podcast version of Rick Astley. I'm going to Rick roll you, buddy. But anyways, up next, we have a $20 super chat from HT, who says, who is the older brother, Enforcer or Enforcer Matt? And believe it or not, Enforcer Matt is actually the older brother. But Enforcer, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I wanted to add to that Matthew is straight up lying to you. I'm in fact 29. I'm just kidding with y'all because they'll stay around forever. People will be like, wait, I thought you were 29. No, I'm not 29. I'm only 20. I had to think about that for a second. I had to remember what I put down on my driver's license, but I'm just playing. But anyways, getting back to that, I am only 20. Matthew is 22, I think now. I think you're 22, aren't you?
I think so.
I think so. Matthew and me don't even know how old Matthew really is. And also I really don't know how old I am. I'm just kind of taking a guess at it, but
whatever, it's real convenient for me, folks, because whatever the year ends in, like it's 2022 right now, that's how old I am. I'm 22. Next year it's 2023, I'll be 23. It's that simple.
Yeah, and it makes his life very simple. I have to subtract 2 years from the year date, and that's how old I am. So with that, I hope that addresses your question fairly well. Matthew is in fact the older one by about 18 months, I believe. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Melanie Cortez, who says, thank you very much, Enforcers. So grateful for you guys. Glory to all the defenders of Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Melanie Cortez. Now, I gotta ask a question. Is that Mel Cortez renamed?
I don't think so.
Interesting. Then we have two Mel Cortezes in here. One is Melanie Cortez, the other one's Mel Cortez. I would be interested to know if y'all are two separate people, because that's the closest that the names have ever gotten in here, rather than Junebug72 and Junebug. But getting back to that, I thank you so much once again for the kind words and enjoying this channel so much. I'm glad that a lot of people have found this as their channel, and whenever we're on, y'all hop on here and watch it and enjoy the news and enjoy each other as the Lee Spring Army as a whole. I've noticed that loads of people in our live chat look forward to seeing each other each and every day, and it's good to know that this stream is just kind of formed itself into an entire community in a way, and a lot of people just enjoy being here. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support as well. And with your support, we are able to keep on going and keep on answering live chats and super chats. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Digifix, who says, a little pizza cash.
Hey, I love pizza. Of course, as all y'all know, while I'm sitting here trying to eat a stick of mozzarella cheese. You want one, Matthew?
No.
All right. I'm eating a stick of mozzarella cheese. I love pizza. Pizza is delicious. And I honestly think, after going back and eating some of Papa John's pizzas, the chicken barbecue is actually surprisingly good. What do you think about it, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I like all their pizza. I know there's a lot of hatred in the live chat for Papa John's, but I think it's pretty good.
Interesting. Also, thank you for sharing that with me, Matthew. I did not know that. But I really do like the chicken barbecue one. It's really good. And also, it's weird that they use barbecue sauce as the base. That's just, it's weird, but it's really good, if you all know what I mean. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And of course, we always love a little bit of extra support for our pizza fund. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And Melanie Cortez says, I'm the same one. So Mel Cortez is Melanie Cortez. I did not know that. So that's good to know. I don't know what made you change your name, though. I like Mel Cortez. It was catchy. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Superbonker 9000, meaning that NAFO has entered the chat.
Hey!
They say, sweet smell of Texas. Oi, Slava Ukraine.
Sweet smell of Texas. He's here. I sense it. Psyops is about to pop in. He's going to be like, Texas stinks. But I do thank you for the support, Superbonker 9000. It's good to hear that our Superbonker is back in the chat. And of course, back in action. I think you've been missing for a couple of nights, if I remember correctly. And I hope that you've been fine during those nights. And I'm glad to have you back. Now, real quick to address that, the sweet smell of Texas. I've heard a lot of bad things. And I've never gone out to West Texas to find it out. But I've heard a lot of bad things about West Texas. So let's drop down in the town of Fort Stockton and let's see what it looks like. West Texas. It looks like interesting. It's kind of got its own little style in a way. What are you laughing at, Matthew?
I'm sorry. I saw Steve Marshall saying in the live chat, but did you eat 40 Papa John's pizzas in 30 days? No, I haven't done that. But I heard Papa John Snatter did.
I've eaten 40 Papa John's pizzas in 30 days, and you can taste the degrading in the quality. I have to tell you, man, 40 pizzas in 30 days, that man was sweating on that interview, not because he was nervous, not because the lights were bright. He still had meat sweats from eating that many pizzas in such a short amount of time. I'm telling you, that guy was almost dead from like cholesterol overdose from eating that many pizzas. But anyways, Texas does look nice in some areas. I don't think West Texas is my favorite. I'll be honest with y'all, really anywhere in the desert isn't my favorite. I don't like the desolation of a desert. Like right here, I'll drop down here. I know this is for some people. Some people do enjoy this stuff. But for me, this just isn't what I image as beautiful landscape. I don't know about you, Matthew.
That's not beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, but there is differences. There are differences. You can go.
It's just flat and empty.
You can go to the more arid places of I guess you could say the western U.S., like in Wyoming here. And this looks neat because it's got some elevation to it out there, and so it does add a little bit of variety. And also the
looks like one of those roads that you might drive down at night and see like something hovering above you or something.
No, this is the road you go down at night, and there's the hitchhiker in the middle of nowhere, like with blood-covered hands and a bloody butcher knife in their hand. This would be the place. But Wyoming, I would have to say, out of like the more arid environments in the U.S., I believe that Wyoming is about my favorite. It just looks nice when you're there, and while it is arid, it still has a bit of a, I guess you could say, a greener, lusher look to the vegetation on the ground, although it's still kind of scrub brush. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question in a fairly good way, not specifically about Texas, but about landscape. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Superbunker, and thank you so much for being a part of the Sleece Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Wookie KS, who says, Enforcer, as a World War I history buff, have you been to the World War I Museum in Kansas City? It's amazing. I've been there multiple times, and my grandfather fought in World War I. His regiment was gassed, thus ending his deployment, and Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraini. And real quick, oh man, now I got to tell this story in the complete unadulterated way. Our family took a massive road trip out west, and one of the first cities we made it to, believe it or not, we actually lived in Montgomery, Alabama during the time we made this road trip. Yeah, we did. I had to make sure of that. We drove all the way from Montgomery up through Tennessee, then past Kentucky. We drove through Paducah, then up into Illinois, through St. Louis, and all the way to Kansas City in one day. It was 16 hours of nonstop driving. We almost did not stop, and we made it to Kansas City. Now, when we got there, I already knew about the World War I Museum before we even got there, and it was something that I was really looking forward to going to, because, of course, if you're a World War I enthusiast, this is like the mecca of World War I. It's the biggest museum for World War I in the whole world. And so, I wanted to go here. And my family, who's not really a big fan...
We parked in the parking lot, at least.
Yeah, my family, including Matthew, who's not really a big fan of World War I or history, or museums for that matter, did not want to go to it. So I kind of got in a little bit of a rigmarole with them, and so I finally got to negotiate us pulling into the parking lot, and me being able to walk up onto the promenade, I guess you could say, of this museum. But I didn't get to go into it because we had to drive another 13 or 14 or 16 hours all the way to Denver, Colorado in the same day. Honestly, that trip kind of ended up being just pretty much me sitting in the back of a car for 16 hours a day and not really doing or seeing much. But that was one of the things I missed so much. I wanted to go to this museum, and all I got to do was stand on top of it. But here's some pictures of it, just in case y'all don't know. It's an impressive museum, loads of artifacts. It's also just an impressive thing to see.
And also, folks, a side note, 16 hours in a car is enough to make anybody, like, extremely irritable. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll end up fighting.
Yes, you will. You will end up fighting. And also another thing is that it really kills the whole idea of it being a vacation. This is not relaxing whatsoever. You're in a cramped seat in a car, driving 16 hours a day, constantly having to deal with traffic in some places, unless you're in Kansas, then there's just nothing there. But it wasn't exactly the funnest trip I had. I would like to go back out west again and actually do it right this time. And not just drive through it nonstop, but it was still interesting in a way. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. I had stood on it, but I never went in it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Mr. Cheney, also known as Will Riley, who says, Mr. Cheney believes that if Uncle Vulva won't go full mobilization because he fears he will piss off the country, do you honestly think that he will use nukes? Go big or go home, dude. No one believes your BS.
And thank you so much for the support, Mr. Cheney. And to answer that question, I do not think that Russia will use nukes. They've been threatening that ever since the very first speech that opened up the special military operation. And so in that perspective, this is once again full of hot air, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Putin is a psycho after all, and that throws in a wild card variable into this that we can't really account for. So with that in mind, I don't really know. But I do think that he did not call in the full mobilization because that would send the entire nation into riots. It would make them openly hostile against the government, and then that means that the government probably wouldn't live too long beyond that. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for supporting this channel, Will Riley. We haven't had Dick Cheney around for a little bit, and it's good to see that he is finally back and in action. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Tuluvian, who says, once the referendum is passed and Ukraine territory is declared Russia, the drafted fighters only need a few days of training. Without the referendum, they would be trained longer. Putin's strategy makes absolutely no sense at all.
And it's a pretty interesting idea. It does make sense in a way, though. This is their attempt to try and end the war and make it still look like a victory, although we can tell that they're now on the losing side. I really hate how shenanigans are pulled these days, and the only reason that these kind of shenanigans even get pulled at all are because there's nuclear weapons involved. I honestly wish that nuclear weapons could be outlawed worldwide. No nation anywhere in the world would have nuclear arms, so that way the conventional wars could be more fleshed out and actually reflect the end result. Because it's insane to think that the Russians would lose in every single situation if it wasn't for the nuclear weapons. That's literally the only thing that's kind of stopping the ball from rolling here full speed. And so with that, I do think it's an insane strategy, and the only reason it's being pulled off is because Russia once again has the nuclear umbrella to fall into. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, pick a random question in the chat. This one is on me. And this question is sponsored by Zyper Sniper 1. And it goes to, let's see here. It goes to, let me see, Cody Griffith, who says, now that Putin has partially mobilized, are the chances of NATO getting involved higher?
I believe that it's going to start getting higher, since we've seen that the escalation is occurring, and the Russians seem to not be backing down. If they continue to have to try and step up their series of escalations, it will inevitably lead to NATO getting involved, because one of those steps will be either biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons being used, and that, in its own right, will, of course, invoke NATO most likely getting involved, especially because of the U.S. pledge, well, I guess you could say guarantee that they gave to Ukraine months ago. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. It's a bit of a brief answer, but hopefully it covers it fair enough. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, if the 300,000 conscripts is a disaster, how many scenarios does Putin have left to use until, unfortunately, he'll be forced into a corner to use nukes, if not overthrown before then?
So if the partial mobilization doesn't work, he can then call in a full mobilization, removing the domestic side of things out of the picture for a second. If the full mobilization doesn't work, then they can try a protracted air campaign, much like Operation Linebacker in Ukraine. Then if the air campaign doesn't work, then they could send in the entire military, just bar trying to keep 200,000 of them in there, open up a front line spanning all the way from Kherson to Brest, and just start pushing from everywhere you can, regardless of how well equipped these soldiers are. Then, if that fails, if all-out war using the entire Russian military somehow failed, then nuclear weapons would be used. And once again, some of these don't really make a lot of sense, those steps, but they are options, somewhat more outlandish ones, however, that the Russians could use to try and, I guess you could say, turn the war into their favor. But once again, take those with a grain of salt, because they may not even use most of them. But those are some of the options that they could use in terms of escalatory actions until they eventually get to nuclear weapons, because the Russian military just can't do anything right. And so with that, I hope I addressed that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, big shout out to BC Skyman for putting in a $20 super chat, and I think he's already gotten off for the night. And also a big shout out to Super Creech for putting in a $10 super chat as well. No comments or questions, but thank you very much to both of you for the support, and we appreciate you being longtime channel viewers. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything to it?
Yes, I would. I would like to thank both of y'all, of course, for supporting this channel. Without y'all, it is impossible to keep this channel running. Every single one of y'all chips in a massive way to make sure that our streams keep on trucking. And of course, y'all have helped us out once again tonight to be able to keep these streams going well into the future. And so thank you so much to both of y'all once again for y'all's support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Eduardo Gonzalez, who says, let's stop the pretense that we are not at war with Russia and begin pre-deployment into theater to assure we do not step on our, you-know-what, if the Russians do decide to go over the line. Wow, I hate war.
That's a pretty interesting suggestion. However, that could have the reversed effect of starting the war, because the Russians could then find out, or then see, that massive amounts of U.S. forces are now starting to build up along their border in the Baltic and also along the Belarusian border, and that may make the Russians think, since Putin is already paranoid and freaked out, that would kind of give them a reason to say, oh my god, they are building up and they're going to invade Russia. Because remember this, The Russians would do a similar thing starting off in Ukraine. They built up their forces around the Ukrainian border, said they were engaged in war games, and then they invaded. The United States could do the very same thing. Also, there was a war game in 1985 called Able Archer. Actually, it was 19... All right, hang on, let me make sure it was 1985. Nope, I'm sorry, it was 1983. Let me make sure I was correct with this. Yep. Operation Able Archer in 1983, not 1985, was so large that the Soviet Union actually believed it was being used as a cover-up to start a preemptive war. And so you can kind of see how a build-up of forces, a massive one, even if it's for war games or anything similar, can lead people to be scared that that is a preemptive build-up for a preemptive strike in a war.
Enforcer, that's ironic because that's exactly what the Russians did, building up their so-called training exercises around Ukraine before they invaded.
It is. It's very reminiscent of that. And the Russians, considering that they just used that play in the playbook, would be looking at what the U.S. and the West would be doing almost in the exact same way, and would probably get so scared that they may start conducting preemptive strikes on the U.S. forces there, although they probably wouldn't succeed, and then war would begin immediately. And so while a great idea and a good show of force, it could lead us into a pretty bad result. This is a very fragile situation right now, and I guess you could say any somewhat aggressive moves on Russia's border that we commit could lead us directly into the war. So we always have to gauge this carefully and see if we can negotiate the situation where we end up on the right side of history and end up winning without having to go down, I guess you could say, the worst route possible, which is all-out war. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Bass Girl, who says, how will Russia reestablish diplomacy with countries after the war? Do you think that Putin will be removed in order for this to occur? Y'all are both fantastic and wonderful. This stream is the perfect ending to my day. Much love.
And I thank you so much for the support and also those incredibly kind words, Bass Girl. You always say fantastic, and that's a pretty funny word. I like it. It is, of course, fantastic. And so with that, moving on to the question, do you think Putin will be removed in order for this to occur? And that's speaking about reestablishing diplomacy with countries after the war. And in that regard, I would have to say Russia will most likely not have a lot of diplomatic relations with countries outside of their sphere of influence in China after the war, because most countries wouldn't really be open for it. Look at most of the Western countries and the United States, and I'm very certain that a lot of those politicians will not be too eager to start up any kind of diplomatic talks or discussions with the Russians about anything from that point forward. I think if the Russians did try and do that, Putin would have to go. Putin so far is looked at like Hitler. He pretty much is very close to it. And so I think he would have to go if that route did happen. And even then, I feel like it would be a highly unlikely one. But once again, take that with a grain of salt. I may be right, I may be wrong. Only time will tell. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Bass Girl, and also those kind words once again. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick to address the poll that I put up, the question was, should nukes be outlawed globally? 57% said yes, nukes are too risky, 23% said no, it would encourage more war, and 20% said none of the above. Now on this one, I have to be with the 23% that say no, it would encourage more wars, because here's the catch with nukes. It's like the genie in the bottle. Once you let it out, you can't get it back in. Nukes are never going to be completely outlawed ever. To me, that's just wishful thinking. To think that can actually happen is a little unrealistic. But if we could hypothetically get rid of them all, that would definitely encourage more conventional warfare, which is not a good thing. But Enforcer, would you like to revisit that one?
I feel, actually, I would have to side with, I would actually, if I can make my own option to poll, I'm one of those viewers, Matthew, you didn't put another option to poll.
Yes.
But to answer that, I feel like nukes should be removed because more conventional wars will happen, and also it will reset the playing field that we have right now. The Russians should not be as prevalent a force that they are. The only reason they are is because they have nuclear weapons. That's the only reason. If it wasn't for that, they would be even worse off than any other Eastern European country there is right now. so in that regard, it levels the playing field and makes it a lot more fair. Countries are far more successful then based off of their economic success and the size of their conventional military, more so than the nuclear weapons that they were able to keep from times long gone. Another thing is that it would encourage more wars, and it would also make things a lot more dynamic. And I know that wars are a terrible thing, but wars are a motivating progress in this, I guess you could say a motivating force for progress in this world. Wars can actually change things for the better. For example, a lot of people complain about the nations in the Middle East and their borders not really accurately depicting who's where and who's doing what. Specifically with the Kurds. The Kurds are kind of separated into all of these countries. If there was no involvement there whatsoever, and a war just occurred in between the Kurds and all of the countries that are in the Middle East, they may actually be able to come out with an independent country, or other things could happen in the Middle East. Anything. The world becomes a sandbox and could become a lot more dynamic and fluid to the times. And of course, war being one of those, I guess you could say, motivating factors. Also, wars, as you can see, like right now, lead to more progress. We start to see new kinds of technologies being used for the first time, and once they're seen to be successful, they start to really pick up a lot of ground, and they start to, I guess you could say, progress and evolve much faster than they would have any other way. But then again, that's just my opinion. I know that wars aren't the greatest of things, and of course, they're nothing that should be encouraged, but if nukes could be removed, conventional wars could take place that need to happen, so that way the world can actually start to move in the direction it should be heading in, instead of being stuck in something of a stasis like it is right now, where nothing can really change, because if something does change, you threaten having the entire surface of the earth get turned into a nice sheet of glass. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Oats Air, who says, for some reason, YouTube doesn't give me a notification when the stream starts. It's annoying. I'll go back and watch everything I missed once the stream ends, and Slava Ukraine. And also, real quick, Oats Air, please make sure you have the bell icon clicked next to the subscribe button, and that may be partially why you're not getting the notifications. However, YouTube's been a little finicky here recently.
And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. Was there anything else in there, Matthew?
He said he'll watch the stream over again.
All right. And I'm sorry that you didn't catch it on time, but of course, that is what the replay is for. And the replays are as good as the live ones. It's just that it's not live. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again. And I'm sorry that you didn't catch it live.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, good evening. I'm donating a live chat question, and enjoy. And Santiago, thank you very much, as always, for the support. And this question is sponsored by Santiago Flores. And the live chat question goes to Moss Shark, who says, what is your favorite military weapon? Now, for me, before the enforcer answers, I have to say it's the CIWS. I forgot what the nickname is for it, but it's the sentry gun, the phalanx. That's it.
Oh, I thought you were talking. Yeah, there we go. Here it is.
Yes. And also, CRAM, I think, is the land-based version.
Yeah, it actually is. Matthew's starting to become a little bit of a geek on the CIWS systems, kind of like I am on everything else. And it's good to see. I like that. So
but if I had to have a second favorite military weapon, it would be the A-10.
That's a pretty solid pick. Now, of course, me being a huge history buff and a World War I guy, I'm about to bring y'all to the one thing that I think changed warfare forever until the rest of all time. Let me introduce y'all to the Maxim machine gun. A simple weapon for a simpler time. The Maxim machine gun was the first modern machine gun in the world. Almost all machine guns that would be used in the First World War would use the principles that were made in the Maxim to one degree or another. The Maxim was a Russian design, but by and large, it didn't really end up being Russian. It ended up being everything but Russian. The Germans would kind of adapt it into the MG08. The British would adapt it into the Vickers machine gun, which is incredibly similar. But this gun right here is much like the invention of fire. I wish I could show y'all this meme on stream. It's a meme of Barney Rubble making fire, from Fred Flintstone. And he sits there and he starts talking about it hurts, Fred. And then he starts talking about all of the stuff that people will do in the future because of fire being made. This machine gun is pretty much that in terms of warfare. Without the machine gun, there wouldn't have been there wouldn't have been good aircraft, just to say, good combat aircraft. That would have never started to become a field that would exist. There would still be reconnaissance aircraft. It would have never led to tanks. It would have never led to the dissolution of, I guess you could say, the line formations that were used in eras prior. It would have led to none of the modern warfare and the modern weapons we have today. And it all started right here with this Vickers machine gun. If this gun had never been made, warfare would have been entirely different up till the present day. In fact, hell, you could even argue that nuclear weapons wouldn't have been made because wars wouldn't have become so massively industrialized and destructive because of the indirect influence of the machine gun that there would have been no need to create a nuclear weapon in such a destructive force, because there would have been no reason to try and avoid war. There wouldn't have been a single gun that could do the work of an entire battalion at a single time. So with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well, in my opinion. Of course, y'all know I'm a World War I geek, so I'm always going to pick something World War I-esque. But I don't really like this weapon because it would work well in the modern day. I like it because of its historical significance. And also, I have shot one of these, and they are very fun to shoot. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, big shout out to Carson Larimore for putting in a $10 super chat. And thank you very much for your support of the channel. We appreciate you very much. And up next, we have another $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, back in 1996, the USA bought the MiG-29 from Moldova to prevent them from being sold to Iran, and I suspect that the USA has sent part and supplies of those aircraft to Ukraine.
They probably have. The United States has a lot of weird stuff that they just bought over time. In case if y'all don't know, there was actually a secret operation that was conducted during the Cold War for F-14 pilots and also other pilots throughout all branches of the military that had an aviation wing called Constant Peg. And that's where we got aircraft from around the world that were MiG-23s, and we would square them up against the U.S.'s, fighter pilots and aircraft in training schools, I believe near the White Sands test range. Really interesting little project, interesting history, and they were actually using that project to hide the fact that the SR-71 was being tested at the exact same site. But anyways, moving beyond all that and all that interesting story and history, it's still interesting to hear all of the weird stuff that the U.S. has bought and procured over time that's somewhat Soviet tech in a way. And I bet you, I would guarantee you as well, that those parts have probably made it into Ukraine. I wonder if the Western countries have been shipping over all of the aircraft in part kits, pretty much, and then the Ukrainians assemble them inside of Ukraine. If they did that, that would be pretty interesting. And, of course, we haven't heard anything about it to confirm it anyways. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat once more from Carson Larimore, who says, does this mean that it is allowed to be called this is a war, and can the ones in prison be released?
I don't think it can still be called a war in Russia, so I don't think the prisoners would be released. So I hope that answers the question fairly well, and I thank you very much for the support. I think I may be misunderstanding the question a little bit, so if I am, make sure to clarify that in the live chat, and we'll try and circle back to it and answer it a little bit better. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again. And also, real quick, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
So we have, let's see, your quick maths in the head real quick. Let's see.
Quick maths.
Let's see, about 20 or so.
All right. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Trevor Ozel, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I have followed and played your podcast at my barbershop since almost day one. Keep up the great work, and you both have a face for radio. And Trevor, that is pretty cool that we're being played in the barbershop. I'm just trying to visualize that in my head. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. It's so weird to me sometimes to hear stuff like that, because I never think about us being on the levels of normal podcasters. I always just think we're running a little like mom and pop shop kind of YouTube channel here that people watch and people enjoy, but it never really hits me that a lot of people listen to this in their car like it's a show. A lot of people show this in their barber shop like it's something on TV. That's really cool to me, and I love that you enjoy these streams so much, and I hope that you're able to continue watching them well into the future. Hopefully the war will end soon, but hopefully if it's still going on, you'll be able to keep on watching it well on until then. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you so much for playing our show in your barbershop. That is really cool. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from DJ Blitz, who says, "You guys do a fantastic production. I am sure you get this a lot, but have you thought of hiring or getting a volunteer who can speak Russian and Ukrainian to translate clips in real time? Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraini. And also to answer that question, great question. We have looked into doing that before. The problem is that it's almost unfeasible to do with the time constraints we have. We would have to find the videos and send them to that person in time to get a translation back, and then find a way to catalog that translation so that way we can have it on stream. The amount of time that we have is just too small for that to be possible. So sadly, it can't happen. That specific idea, we've tried many times before, it just never works out. But I do thank you a lot for the massive support, and also thank you very much for the kind words as well. It does mean a lot to us that a lot of people enjoy this channel, and hopefully we're able to keep it going well into the future, like I've said about 20 times tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from, and Joseph, hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I forgot how to say it, sadly. Joseph M., I think it's Seco. He says, "So everyone just calls me Seek now. Stuck when they started to call me it in the Marines. So how do you guys prepare for this? You guys average how many hours going over things beforehand? And you guys prep well?"
Well, that's a great question, Seco. I got to make sure to try and get that right. I got to get that down as muscle memory. The prep, we don't actually talk before stream. Matthew, for the first time Matthew gets on the stream at night is 4 minutes before the stream most of the time. His job doesn't really require him to know a lot about the war or what's going on. It just requires him to be mentally sharp as a tack, so that way he can shoot down bots, gather questions, and of course interact with you all in the live chat. I can't do that because I'm running the show. So my prep time is usually about twice as long as the stream itself. Most instances. Actually, I would say it's about 1.5 times longer, not 2 times longer. That's a little too long. So I go through and I collect all the news. I put it down on the map, adjust the front lines where needed, and then I kind of hash over what's going on where, try and figure out what kind of segments everything will be divvied up into. And that's how I prepare. And also we do this little pre-stream warm-up thing. I don't know where in the world we started doing this, but when we both get on a call, we go, "Totoro!" And we just keep doing that for like the next 2 minutes or so. And I guess that's kind of like our hyping up that we do to get ready to do this. Because you do have to be in a certain kind of mental mindset. Like I could go through a terrible day, or I could go through a great day. And hopefully none of y'all have been able to tell. And I get on the stream and I sound the exact same way every single time, and that's because I try and get myself into a specific headspace to be able to do that. So I guess, I don't know, it's not acting, but it's making sure that I'm not, coming on in a bad mood. Because wouldn't you hate if you were on stream one day and I had this kind of energy, and the next day I just sounded like this, and like the whole world was just hell, and here's the news, like that would and also Matthew, that last little bit sounded like a food review running on empty.
Oh yeah, it did. And folks, sometimes when we jump on here, we're coming straight out of like the textbook for our classes, so it's like going from like mundane, like sort of dragging along to like, okay, now it's time to like get some hype going.
Yeah, and so, like Matthew and me, we've got to get hyped up. We do this little pre-warm-up thing, I guess, with the Totoros. Don't even know what Totoro is. I just heard it at some point, I think, in a, like, passing something. I heard Totoro, and I was like, Totoro! I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I like that little word. And so I just started using it. But, anyways, I hope that kind of answers the question in a way. There isn't, also, one other thing. There is no script. When I'm covering the news and y'all think, oh, it's so like if y'all say this, you know, you could say something else. Oh, it's so eloquent and well put together and everything's so well constructed. All of that's being done at that very minute. It's never been done before. There's never any pre-stream rehearsals or anything like that. I'm having to come up with all that stuff at the very second you're watching it, like right now. And so everything I'm thinking, everything I'm saying has to be done probably just a split second before I'm actually speaking it out. So if you find that impressive, hopefully my ad-lib skills as president of the United States will be as impressive, and I won't need a teleprompter to give my speeches and addresses to the public, save the occasional stutter or stammer. And every once in a while, Matthew, real quick, have you ever watched the movie The King's Speech?
I have not.
It's a movie about King George VI, and he had a bit of he actually had a massive stammering and stuttering problem. And whenever I stammer or stutter on stream, just a little, I always think of that of the Colin Firth, which is one of the few actors I know on that movie, and he sat there and everyone's going to remember me as King George stammerer. Because I like for some reason whenever you're doing anything on stream, you mess up. It like just haunts you for the rest of it. So if I stammer or stutter, I'll be thinking about that for probably the next 5 or 10 minutes on stream. I'll be like, man, it wasn't that screw up. So anyways, with that, I hope I addressed that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Oats Air, who says, I think the stream notification problem is due to my Wi-Fi security system that sometimes causes my notifications not to work. But enough about me. Let's get a question from the chat answered, as that's what it's all about. And we are going to honor that. And thank you very much, Oats Air, for the continued support. And this live chat question goes to Mitch, who says, what percent of land is occupied by Russia now? It was 20% of Ukraine before the counteroffensive.
Right now, it's around 15%. The Ukrainians have reclaimed about 5% of the territory that the Russians have taken during this war, at least in the southeastern area. If you include the northern area, it's a lot more, but the Russians didn't really hold that long enough for us to actually consider that in, I guess, our statistics and breakdown. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and thank you once again, Osair, for sponsoring a live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Cliff H, who says, Enforcer, regarding the battle reenactments, how scripted is it? Does each soldier get a plan for if and where they are to fall? Have you ever seen anyone go dramatically off the script? And thank you.
Actually, believe it or not, reenactments are heavily scripted. Almost everything that we do is pre-planned and rehearsed because we are dealing with actual guns, and while they're shooting blanks, if you remember anything about Alec Baldwin and what happened there, shooting blank firing guns can still be somewhat dangerous if done wrongly. Although that was live ammo that was put into that gun, and being a reenactor, I have absolutely no idea how no one caught that. You know, because and everything I heard was stupid. Every excuse. And just to get into that real quick about Alec Baldwin saying, I just trusted the armor. Why would you do that? In reenacting, here's what we do as our process. We have one person who's in charge of all the ammunition. And so you come up and they're like, what caliber? 22, because that's a common reenacting caliber for most eras because it's cheap. But the gun will still look like its actual original caliber and everything like that. So you get 6 rounds, like for a revolver, of 22 blanks. You look at them in front of our armor, I guess you could call them, and then in front of the armor, you personally load each and every round into that revolver. Then you sit there, you conk the hammer back all the way, pull the trigger a little bit, ease the hammer forward, and you're set to go. Of course, make sure that the safety's on if the revolver has a safety, and you're good. That is how we've done it all the time in the reenacting world. And to sit there and think that in Hollywood, which works off of a multi-million-dollar budget, tens of millions of dollars is a budget on most films these days, and to think that you just hand it to some 20-year-old person who looks like they just got done eating chicken nuggets and you expect them to load the thing without even knowing a lot about guns with blank ammo, and I don't even know how live ammo made it on set for that specific caliber of gun. But anyways, to load it with blank ammo, well, to expect them to do that and then just hand it to you and you don't even check it, that's a massive safety issues that are being overlooked right there. That's my personal opinion, of course, having experience doing it. But anyways, getting back to how reenacting works, there's usually a plan. You know, like, okay, we march this way if you're in a unit, or we all go this way. We'll have a little bit of a shootout, you know, fire off this many rounds. And then so-and-so, like in their cowboy shootouts, it's like so-and-so, you run outside and you start firing off rounds. I actually did this cool thing one time where I was supposed to be like this epic cool gunslinger, like, of the West. And so I, like, popped out of a door of, like, a mill, and I started shooting at everyone, and their heads went down. I started yelling for, like, the marshal or whatever, and I grabbed onto their vest, and we get, like, flung each other to the ground, and, you know, got in a tussle and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool, but it's all scripted and pre-planned out massively, so that way there's no problems or issues. And I haven't seen anyone go massively off script. The only time I've seen anything bad happen, and I haven't really even seen this, is when people have, like, heat injuries, like heat stroke or heat cramps. That's really the only time I see people going off script, but it's not that much. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from Tim DeMoranville, who puts in a $20 donation. And he says, I donated $100 earlier tonight, but I just wanted to hear Matthew try and pronounce my name again, LOL. And yes, Tim, I did say it in my head a few times before I read it off just then. Hopefully I said it right. He says, I've been watching from close to day one and haven't hardly missed a night since. Just want to thank you both for what you do. And thank you very much for the kind words, Tim.
And also, thank you once again for the support, Tim. And also the kind words as well. And also, I like that you just threw that in to see Matthew pronounce your last name again. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope you enjoyed that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, the THAAD interceptor can hit ballistic missiles in and out of the atmosphere. So says the MDA fact sheet. The Army has 7 batteries deployed. And did you know that UAE shot down Iran missile in January?
I didn't know about the missile that it shot down in January, but that is interesting here that the THAAD can shoot down intercontinental ballistic missiles somewhere in their flight path. I'm assuming, considering that they would be shooting them down in space, that means that these THAAD batteries are most likely deployed in Canada. That would be the most logical place for them to be, but then again, I could be wrong. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also providing a little bit of additional information to us. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Mech15, who says, this one goes to sponsor another question from the live chat, another great stream, and Slava Ukraine. And Mech, thank you very much for the support. And as always, this one is sponsored by Mech15. And the question goes to David, who says, Enforcer, the FSB is not above totally staging protests with its own boys, so that what happens to protesters can be broadcast.
Interesting. That may be the case, but then again, I feel like that's getting usually, because the world's a very simple place, and believe it or not, a lot of governments are filled with a lot of incompetent and goofy people. Now, not to rat, you know, because of course I don't weigh in on American politics, but not to rat on American bureaucracy too much. A lot of people in American bureaucracy are a lot simpler minded than you would imagine. Not a lot of them are very nefarious or sneaky with anything they do. A lot of what the U.S. government does is just plain to see. And, you know, I think a lot of people get thrown off by that because it seems like what the government does is so simple and straightforward most of the time that there's got to be something going on behind the scenes. And of course, you know, if you look through the CIA's papers, there were things that happened behind the scenes, but on a very, very small scale. So with that, I hope that addresses the question in a way. It may be possible, but then again, I usually think in the most normal circumstances, and I would feel that that would just be a filming and a depiction of what's actually happening inside of Russia. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from James Hansen, who says, hey guys, and thanks for all the hard work. I've been here since day 30-ish. Here is a place to look up, Arundel, West Sussex, where I grew up.
Let's see, Arundel?
Or Arundel, I think it might be said.
Arundel.
Arundel.
Let's see, and it was spelled Arundel with a D.
It's a A-R-U-N-D-E-L.
A-R-U-N-D-E-L. Arundel, UK.
And West Sussex.
So this would be West Sussex. Here's
Arundel. It's down there near, where is that near?
It's
that
near,
we're familiar with.
Brighton. No, that's not Brighton.
Brighton.
No, we didn't come
South.
down
I was
here.
down there, Southampton. That's where it's near.
Yeah, in Portsmouth, but we never went to Southampton or Portsmouth. We went to Bournemouth, which was an interesting place. You could tell that it did have a heyday back in the day, but sadly that time it passed. And I hate to think that, because there was a lot of nice buildings at Bournemouth that were just in total states of decay. But moving back on over here to Arundel, let's take a look at the old little town of Arundel with the roundabouts. Oh god, those dreadful roundabouts. Roundabouts are cool in idea of dispersing traffic, but they are such a pain, such a hassle to drive over. But let me drop down here real quick in an actual town.
I almost gotten a wreck in there before in the roundabouts.
Yeah. Those
things are dangerous.
A lot of what appears to be like late Victorian buildings like these. And also nice little church back there. Well, cathedral, I guess, is a better word for it. But yeah, I like it. It looks a lot like, I guess you could say, most normal English towns. Believe it or not, I know this may start to divide my British viewers, but I felt like the North was actually better looking than the South in some places. Like, for example, Harrogate. We drove through Harrogate, and Harrogate was a really nice place, at least from what I remember. Hopefully I don't remember wrong. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty nice place. But of course...
The Cotswolds is where it's at.
The Cotswolds, yeah, the Cotswolds was nice, but...
I love Burton on the Water. That is the coolest looking place.
And I'll go to that real quick, just in case if y'all don't know where Burton on the Water is. Of course, the British viewers will know, but it's a neat little place. They use a lot of this yellowish stone, which is actually from Cotswold. It's a Cotswold stone, to build their buildings, which gives them a very distinct look. And I guess you could say this is what most people think of the British countryside. This is what it looks like to most people in their heads. But still, really cool place. Also, there is a stream that goes through this town right here. Here's the place. Guess you could say the most picturesque part of Burton on the Water. It's right here, and you can see the tourists are just flooding the place. That's the sad thing about a lot of the Cotswolds, is that there's just too many people in most of these small villages, and they don't even feel like villages. They feel like cities, like London, nearly, with the amount of like foot traffic they have. But still, pretty cool to see. And also, I thank you so much for the support and letting us take a look at your town of Arundel, which we'll go back down to again. I know my place around. Once I get somewhere and I see it, I'll know my place around. So let's drop down here. Oh, sick! I love this. It looks like a probably late medieval wall. Probably around the 1400s or the late 1300s. And let's see, that is attached to the Arundel Castle, which honestly looks like it could have been about the size, if it continued to be built, of Windsor. It looks a lot like Windsor Castle in its construction in a way, but no, there's not so much. But still, I like it. It looks really nice. When you see the keep right there. Keep hasn't been that great maintained. There's bushes and stuff growing out of it. I'm assuming that that's part of the cathedral or the chapel that's a part of this castle, but ooh, I like that. You know, I'm a huge fan of older architectural styles. I think that they all look really nice and have a lot of character to them. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. I hope you enjoyed us taking a look around at Arundel, which does look like a pretty nice, small little village right outside of your major coastal towns. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, big shout out to our other Mark for putting in a $9 donation, and also Nathan Wright for putting in a $5 donation himself as well. And thank you very much to both of you for your support. And moving right along, we have a $5 super chat from BSG Wolf, who says, "Do you think we are looking at the beginning of the collapse of the Russian Federation in 20 to 30 years?"
I think we will be looking at the collapse of the Russian government, not within the next 20 to 30 years, but if the pressure continues within the next 5 years at least, I think the Russian government would collapse in as little as 5 years. 30 years gives them a lot of time to rebound and a lot of leeway to rebuild, and so I think it would have to happen over a shorter span of time, somewhere around 5 years from now, most likely. But still, I do think we will be seeing the Russian government go through a major shift in the future. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well, and thank you once again, BSG, for the support, and of course, asking a pretty good question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Teluvian, once more, who says, "Tools on the search page. Pick an end date to search for prior articles on Google."
Interesting. That's actually a really good idea, and I thank you for giving us that fix. I'll try and do that next time on stream when we look for something like that. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the little tip. I completely forgot about that ability on Google.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Natalia Penfilova Zuino. Hopefully, I'm not butchering that terribly. But they say, hello from Seattle, and we love your channel.
And hello to Seattle, and I thank you so much for enjoying this channel. Now, Seattle. Let's go take a look at Seattle. Oh, wow, this is nice. Streets are really clean. Oh, I like this. I'm supposing this is the business district of the city. A lot of office buildings. But let's go and hop down into another spot of the town. Because you can't really tell everything about a town just by its downtown alone. So let's drop over here. Alright, looks like a normal neighborhood. So let's hop out of here. And then we'll go up to Cascade and take a look around here. Pretty nice town all around. I gotta say, it actually looks a lot nicer than what I heard. I've never really looked at Street View on Seattle, but here in Alabama, it's usually looked at negatively. A lot of people say that it looks terrible, but honestly, from the Street View I'm seeing, it's not looking that bad. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you for letting us take a quick look at your hometown of Seattle, Washington. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from CA Lags, who says Patriots and THAAD are more suited to IRBMs. The GMD is meant for ICBMs.
And thank you for the support, and thank you for providing that information. Could you reread that off again real quick, because I think I may have missed the last part.
CA Lag said Patriots and THAAD are more suited to IRBMs, and GMD is meant for ICBMs.
GMD. Missile. Speed. Jeez. GMD. Looks like this is it right here. So, is the United States anti-ballistic missile system for intercepting incoming warheads in space. Let me actually read this instead of reading it like that, like one of those infomercials. The ground-based mid-course defense system is the United States anti-ballistic missile system for intercepting incoming warheads in space during the mid-course phase of the ballistic trajectory flight. It is a major component of the American missile defense strategy to counter ballistic missiles, including intercontinental ballistic missiles carrying nuclear, chemical, biological, or conventional warheads. The system is deployed in military bases in the states of Alaska and California. In 2018, comprising 44 interceptors and spanning 15 time zones with sensors on land, at sea, and in orbit. In 2019, a missile defense review requested that 20 additional ground-based interceptors be based in Alaska. So, let's see. Now, hearing all that, this is really interesting. Oh, what in the world is that? It's like an oil rig, but with a giant radar on it.
Dang.
That is really cool. But I actually didn't, I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm completely ignorant about most of the United States' missile defense systems, and this appears to be one of them that I didn't really know about. But still, good to know that we do have some kind of nuclear missile defense systems at all, because up until now, I thought we didn't have any, well, at least any of sizable note. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for sharing that with us, because I actually didn't know it.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from the NOLA Guide, who says, if the Russians preempted a nuclear explosion over mid-America in the stratosphere, how many missiles could the U.S. actually launch post-EMP?
I feel like if the United States could launch off nuclear weapons, I feel like we would be able to launch a pretty decent amount of them, because that EMP would not affect our nuclear missile carrying subs at sea, and so those submarines could still launch off loads, dozens if not hundreds, of nuclear weapons at any given notice. And so with that, I feel like it wouldn't really impede us all too much. It may limit our response, but our response would still be devastating, to say the least. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Dmitry Makanov, who says, I'm a Russian American citizen. Glory to Ukraine. And question, do prisoners exchanged have the right to get back into the fight if they want to?
I believe they do, but the going principle is that if they are found again, they usually, as far as I know, as a historical precedent, they're usually executed, because at that point, even if they were prisoners of war, it's expected that they won't return to the service of the country they came from. But then again, I think I could be wrong on that one. I actually am leaning more towards the direction of that may be an incorrect statement. But with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from AJS9437, who says, late to the stream, I hope the message makes it. For the Enforcer, thoughts on the new update for War Thunder, and Enforcer Matt, you're a better looking version of Matthew Broderick, Slava Ukraine. And thanks for the high praise. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for giving Matthew high praise. Honestly, gotta say, I mean, like, this is just honest truth. Matthew does look better than me. I mean, like, you know, if you think otherwise, you know, I mean,
the Enforcer is very insecure about his looks. He criticizes himself too much.
Yeah, but that's usually because he got bullied a lot in school for it. You know, kind of like, you know, like anyone else who got bullied for that in school. But speaking about the last update in War Thunder, that's an excellent question, and something that I'm always into is War Thunder, because it doesn't take a lot of time to get involved in. The update in War Thunder, the last one, was interesting in some regards, specifically because they introduced the SU-25 of all times right now. And since y'all are watching my screen, I don't know if Matthew will be able to see it, but I will. Well, actually, we won't talk about that too much, because I'll be going down a massive rabbit hole that will never. How many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
Let's see. 10.
Okay, so since we only have 10, I will hop on to War Thunder real quick. I'm sorry, everyone, if you're not into games.
Hop on to War Thunder?
Yeah, I'm just going to show everyone around stuff for a second. Speaking of the update, since he asked, it's a good question and something I do a little bit in my free time. I don't have a lot of free time, so I can't really get into games like I used to get into when I did have free time, like Crusader Kings 3, or anything that's kind of in-depth and takes a lot of time. It has to be something that can be played on the spot and then dropped immediately after, and War Thunder is one of those games. So as it loads,
and watch it crash the whole thing.
Yeah,
Enforcer, I'm not sure if your computer has the bandwidth for that.
Actually, it's loading. It is loading, and I have streamed War Thunder before.
That poor computer.
Yeah, God bless it. It's trying its best, everyone. Please bear with it. We're loading in.
I think
now.
I prefer GTA 5 over War Thunder.
I mean, you know, everyone's got their own opinions, I suppose, but the Harrier GR7 was an incredible addition. I wish we got the AV-8B in game. It's depicted somewhat well, although it is lacking in a couple of criteria. Moving on from that, the French, always a solid pick. The Mirage 2000 is a pretty good aircraft. Of course, huge fan of it. The French use it to this day. Pretty good plane. Also, some people are like, video game streaming out? Nah, we're just going over this real quick. Love the Mirage 2000, both in-game and in real life. I think it's a great plane. It's good to see that they finally added it in War Thunder, although it does seem like it is missing some of its actual historical weapons loadouts. Other countries, we won't cover everything like other countries, but there was a lot of interesting stuff added, and one of the things that's been most interesting to me is how the British got the Roycat attack helicopter, which was I mean, a beefy little tanky looking helicopter. I don't really know if I like the appearance of it, but I'm sure it does great. Helicopters in War Thunder, if you know how to play them, do pretty well. And then finally, the last one, let me think. It's the Italians that got it. I'm sure that a lot of y'all will enjoy this, because this is something that's kind of the modern world. They got a Turkish premium helicopter right here, which is really neat, because as you all know, the Turks are the ones who are providing the Ukrainians with the Bayraktar. So with that, we're not going to hang out on War Thunder too long. It was just a quick little mention of the things I like, which I'm a huge plane guy and tank guy, but the planes they added this patch were really good. And so with that, I hope that addressed the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, and I have to say, smell me fingers, wow, 1650? That is crazy, man. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat.
1650
Yes?
what?
On GTA Online.
1650?
With a 6.9 KD. Smell me fingers, you were like a pro level on that game. I've never even heard of that.
Interesting. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, it looks like Ukraine and foreign fighters got 215 and Russia got 55 in exchange, if I read it right. Sounds like a good deal to me, and woo pig suey.
Woo pig suey. And also, to address that, in terms of the numbers, it's a good exchange, but in terms of who we exchange to get those numbers, I don't really know. I mean, like, a prisoner of war exchanges are supposed to be fair and balanced for both sides. So I'm supposing that the Ukrainians found it to be a fair exchange, and so if they found it to be fair, I won't critique it too much. It must have been fair if they were able to undergo that. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And next up, a big shout out to Nathan Wright and also Krister Peterson for each putting in a $5 donation, along with James Hansen, who puts in a $5 donation as well and says, Slava Ukraine.
And also, Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, in Australia, we started collecting body bags and need more volunteers. Please send them directly to Moscow, not the Moskva at the bottom of the sea.
Well, thank you for the support. And also, y'all might want to start building up some funds for some white ladas as well, because the Russians will be needing the bags and the ladas. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $3 super chat from Soul Eater. We also have a $2 donation from Junebug and a $2 donation from Dupper Bob. No comments, but thank you very much for the support. And up next, we have a $3 super chat once more from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, I reckon the Kremlin gremlins' days are numbered. His own orcs will end up eating him alive.
And I would have to say so as well. I think at some point he's going to outstay his welcome on this one, and it's going to be the end of him. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from Rizzo Loca, who says, donation, select a question from the live chat. And this one is sponsored by Rizzo Loca. And it goes to Johnny Oak, who says, do you think the world is ready for the collapse of the Russian Federation?
I think the world is ready for that. I don't think Russia, well, the Russian government's ready for that, but I think everyone else involved is ready for it. And so with that, I hope that does address the question in kind of a short way, but still a pretty good one. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And our last super chat of the night goes to Cakes Boo, who puts in a $1 donation and says, you guys rock.
And Cakes Boo, you rock too. And I thank you so much. And one thing I got to say is that it's just the thought that counts. Sending in $1 support, it's just the thought that counts. And I got to thank you so much for showing your support to this channel through your kind words and also your support as well. It means a lot to us that people do enjoy this channel and want us to keep it going. And so thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are now going to be moving into the live chat questions. Now, one thing I do have to say is that our streams have been going on incredibly long. I feel like almost all of them have become marathon length these days, and right now it appears that we may be able to end one at something of a little bit more reasonable time tonight than most. And so with that, we're going to answer about 10 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, on to the first one.
And up first, our decoders of the stream, WFTU and Mark Hodges have figured out tonight's Morse code. They say Russia's threats of nuclear war are so lame, they've been doing it since the start. Slava Ukraine.
And also Slava Ukraini. And ding, 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 you did get it correct. That is the message, and it's pretty lame because they have been doing it from the start. And so I thank you so much for deciphering that Morse again, and I thank you for enjoying it every single day. I've never seen y'all miss out on a single one, and it's cool to know that y'all are always here and always doing that. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a question from OTubes, who says, what chance do you think there would be of a coup over Putin?
I think a coup over Putin would be pretty interesting. And I think it's actually kind of high, especially if things continue on the way they are right now, and civil unrest begins to rise heavily, and also dissent within the military. I think it would certainly become possible. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And also, I would like to address a live chat of my own real quick, Matthew. Ryan9000 said, Enforcer Matt, will you two ever come home to Wales? And I love Wales. I love the United Kingdom, really. And I know I make jokes about the British sometimes on the stream, but I make those out of respect. And of course, sometimes they do make fun of things like yellow teeth or something like that. But let me tell y'all let me tell y'all this. Let me tell y'all this so that way y'all know that there's at least some merit to it. Matthew and me are British a lot. It's not like your normal American thing where it's like I am like 6% Scottish, and so I'm William Wallace. I'm literally 90% British. That comprises mostly English and Welsh. Most of it's Welsh, the rest of that's English, and then the remainder of it's divided up against the Scots and the Irish. So, largely English and Welsh. I would like to come back to Wales at some point and kind of hang out there and go on vacation there, considering that's where my family actually came from at a time. But it's kind of hard to do that because it kind of throws everything off. Still cool. And one thing I would say is this. If I did not become the president of the United States, one thing that I would find interesting, no room for it, and the chances of this are even far slimmer than becoming president, is becoming a member of the royal family through marriage. Because I know that and of course, Meghan Markle, of course, kind of sullied the waters a little bit on that, but committing service for a country, although the United Kingdom isn't my country, I still respect what the royal family stands for and what they do, pretty much garnering support for the British around the world and within their own country. It would be interesting to do is to show up and, of course, run charities and nonprofits, which is pretty much what I do right now. And they do it on a little bit of a much larger scale than I ever could. So something interesting there. Not really my life's ambition is to marry someone in the royal family, but if it ever happened, I wouldn't really complain. And I'd probably find it to be a whole load of fun, especially the whole side of tradition and history that's involved with that. But, it is what it is. I'm still aiming for president of the United States, and hopefully I can go over there on a state visit and just see the place then. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Nick Riva and a $1 super chat from Kathy Carr. And thank you very much to both of you once more for your support, and we appreciate both of you very much. And we also have one more super chat, this time from Egbert, who puts in a $2 donation and says, Rand Paul tried to warn us all about this. And excuse me, I meant to say Ron Paul, not Rand Paul.
Well, I thank you for the support, but unfortunately I don't weigh into politics too much. And so I can't really weigh in on that a lot. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and back to the live chat. Actually, we have one more super chat. This time from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who puts in a $3 donation and says, first, I have to recover from face reveal and now finding out that you are Palm.
Let's see. You are Palms.
What is that?
Palms. What is a palm? Short for Pomeranian.
No, what is palms, like with an S?
Oh, we're apparently we're British. And they call them palms in Australia. Huh. Is that racist? Just kidding with you. Well, it's sad that you found out we are palms. But we are. And so what you're looking at on camera is pretty much two British people with American accents, at least how the DNA breaks down. It's weird to me, too, because, believe it or not, our family has been in the United States practically since the beginning, since around the 1720s and 30s. And to think that we've gone through American history, of course, the massive influx of Irish immigrants, along with Italian immigrants, and somehow our family has never ended up marrying an Italian or an Irish immigrant, where it shows up a lot in our DNA, as an American. It was very interesting to me that happened. It's a very odd coincidence, very cool in it that just to look at it from like the perspective of how in the hell do you live outside of the United Kingdom, your family does, for 250 years nearly, and still end up being 90% British and the remainder of it's Swedish. It's very odd. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address the comment. Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin. And thank you so much for the support. And I hope the face reveal was not too shocking. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And next up, we have a question from John in New Hampshire, who says, did you hear about the Ukrainian farmer that shot down a Russian jet near the Belarus border? The pilot ejected and unfortunately lived.
Interesting way to put it. I did not hear about that. But interestingly enough, speaking about pilots living, back during the Battle of Britain, sometimes the British, I guess you could say, farmers would ask the German pilots that bailed out over British land why they even had the gall to live on British soil. And sometimes they would attack them and I guess you could say expire them early with pitchforks and other kinds of weapons. You can kind of get the sentiments going on there, especially considering the Germans were flying over their land and bombing London and killing tens of thousands of civilians. But still pretty interesting nonetheless. I did not hear about that story though, and I will be looking for it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Hammerhead, who says, greetings from Huntsville, Alabama. What do you think will happen to Putin if and when he's deposed?
I think if Putin is deposed, either he will be deposed in a negotiation with whoever's rising up against him so he can leave with dignity and remain in Russia like Gorbachev would, or it will be a violent uprising. He'll have to flee and he'll have to try and find a country that'll take him that would be willing to, and there's not a lot that are willing to do such a thing like that. So with that, I hope that answers the question in brief, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Tasman006, who says, Enforcer, did you hear that North Korea denies sending ammo to Russia?
I did hear that. I didn't include that on the news. I did hear that, though, and it is something kind of funny, considering that the ammunition that we saw on the front lines did have Chinese inscriptions on it. So either it's Chinese weaponry that was given to the North Koreans, and then the North Koreans gave it over, or the Chinese gave it over. But still, pretty funny to hear that they're swearing that they haven't given anything to the Russians. And so with that, I hope that it answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Ernst Peschel, who says, protesters may not use force, but can you imagine how many lit cigarettes are going to be dropped? And I forgot, Ernst, that the Russian chain smoker is still in the lamb, so that might be true.
Yeah, and the Russian chain smokers are still going wild out there. I mean, honestly, Matthew, I think they're putting the vaping crisis in America to shame with how many chain smokers there are in Russia. I mean, like, they're going over and they're inflicting billions of dollars of damage all over the place.
True. There's one fellow that loves Lucky Strikes that is running around causing mayhem.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this other guy. There's this other guy who took the general surgeon's warning, and he looked at it and he said, "Smoking may cause death. Well, I'm going to be causing the death." And then he started going around and blowing everything up. But yeah, that's a pretty good consideration to put into it. And so with that, I hope we addressed that little joke pretty good. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a super chat, this time from Dubsy Dabster, who puts in a $5 donation and says, shout out to the chat last night. I was laughing at all the Enforcers comparisons.
And I would have to say I was kind of laughing at them too, because some of them, in my opinion, were just so off. And the ones that got really far off were either the people who kind of looked weird to me. I'm sure they're nice people, but they kind of looked weird. Or they were incredibly thin. Because if y'all ever noticed, I'm not, overwhelmingly large or fat or whatever you like to call it, but I'm not incredibly skinny either, like Matthew. Surprisingly enough, Matthew also eats...
roasted me just then.
Well, no, I mean, here's what's weird about Matthew is that Matthew eats a whole entire wagon's worth of food a day, and he doesn't gain a pound. I eat just a little bit over a normal amount. I'm gaining weight like no tomorrow. It's really weird that way, how his metabolism is an entirely different speed than mine. But those comparisons I kind of almost chuckled at myself, is when I was compared to a video game character that looked pretty thin. I was like, no way. I was like, if I look like that in people's minds, that's a huge compliment, but I don't personally see myself that way. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the last 3 questions of the night.
All right, and the next question goes to, okay, let's sign me up, or let me sign up. Let me try that again. Okay, let me sign up. who says, does Russia have any defense system capable of intercepting at least a few re-entry vehicles? I know America would be able to stop some.
Does Russia have Russian missile defense? Anti-ballistic missile system. So this thing is quite old. And
Look at that drawing over there. That looks like something from Johnny Quest.
You know, honestly, what this looks like, it looks like those cheap books you would get as a kid in the early 2000s that were printed in the 90s that talked about military weapons. They'd be like, a missile flies towards a target and then blows up, you know, or something like that. It looks like an illustration from one of those books. But let's see, apparently these are around Moscow. And wow, that looks like something from Star Wars. You know,
it does really.
Yeah, it's really odd looking. And then here's a silo under some snow. And also we can see some derelict crap just lying around as normal. But it looks like they have a small amount. They have 68 of these things. I think they're the only ones, from what I know. Of course, I don't know a lot about what they have, but it looks like they're the only ones, and they look like they're kind of old. And it was.
And yes, folks, we do know about Johnny Quest. I watched the old cartoons a whole bunch when I was a kid, like Johnny Quest. Well, let's see, the Jetsons, and the Flintstones. Also Fred Flintstones. Boomerang had excellent cartoons back in the day.
And honestly, I gotta say, I don't like modern cartoons much, because the old ones, like, you know, like just me being mean and me being and knowing how the world works, I feel like it's kind of odd these days how modern cartoons are kind of curbed away from any kind of violence whatsoever, even if it's comedic violence. You know, like how in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons there would be like duck season, rabbit season, and then Daffy would get shot and his beak would, you know, spin around his head. I mean, it's just funny situational comedy, and when you remove that kind of comedy, it's almost like you're trying to remove that entire, I guess you could say, facet of humanity. You know, regardless of whether it's a good facet or not, you're removing it from the picture, and it starts to become a little bit weird because you can never go that direction and explore the whole entire, I guess you could say, palette of actions and interactivity that you can have. So I always found it weird that the modern. Go ahead.
Also, Enforcer, another one. I just saw somebody say it. Tom and Jerry, and also the original series like Scooby Doo, like the really early ones. I used to binge watch those when I was a little kid.
Yeah, I mean, all of those were good. I loved all of them. Scooby-Doo, honestly, was very good to me. And also, when I was a really young kid, I'm talking about like up till like about 8 or 9 years old, I was super into Thomas the Train. And I really enjoyed the old ones. The ones that were stop motion, you know, with the little model trains moving around on the train tracks and stuff. That one was honestly the best out of all of them, because I don't know. I mean, like, you know, like the animated one started to come out around the time I stopped watching Thomas the Train, and it didn't really have the same feeling to it. Stop motion was neat. It was special. It kind of reminded me of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with how that was set up. And so, you know, that's just me. I like the old cartoons. That's one of the few things I can talk about at length, I guess, about pop culture. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Angel, who says, are they modern nuclear weapons or are they same ones from 60s in Russia?
Modern nuclear weapons are the same ones from the 60s. Most likely, most of them are quite old, although we do know that the Russians have apparently developed a small number of newer and more advanced nuclear missiles. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And with that, I think we're on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person with the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be X Mojo, who says, how do you think other nuclear states beside NATO or Russia would respond in a conflict, specifically India and China?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
How do you think the other nuclear states beside NATO or Russia would respond in a conflict, specifically India and China?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think everyone would see it. I think everyone in the world would go, hey, maybe it's time for peace, guys. Because you don't know, if no one knows anything about India, Pakistan, and China, they are like the holy trifecta of like nuclear war almost every day, but no one cares kind of thing. They all, like India and Pakistan, actually fire artillery at each other often and kill each other's soldiers and destroy equipment. And they're both nuclear powers with hundreds of nuclear weapons. And it's always scary to see that happen because you're like, oh God, is it about to happen? And it never does, but it's still a huge concern. Also, the Indians and the Chinese get into massive confrontations in the Himalayas over who actually controls certain areas of the Kashmir, which could devolve, because it keeps on getting more and more violent recently, it could devolve into armed conflict again. I don't think it would go nuclear. But I feel like a lot of countries will try and step in and not do anything too harsh or extreme and just try and find a way to find middle ground in between the two and end the war as best as possible. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And with that, that is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to answer everyone's questions and of course cover the news tonight. And if you did enjoy, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. These streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. And so with that, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover day 212 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again. Take care and have a great night.